Chapter 500. No, no. Brother-in-law, I'll leave now. Miss 8 bent her knees and saluted. Her ears were red and her face was red. She lowered her head and walked outside. Pang Xiao looked at Miss 8's back and smiled coldly. He asked bluntly, "Who asked you to come?" Miss 8 stopped in her tracks. She turned around and looked at Pang Xiao with fear and embarrassment. The family Qin won't have no maidservant to serve tea. You're the miss of the family Qin. Whose idea was it to ask you to serve tea in the front hall? Pang Xiao didn't restrain his momentum. He had been irritable these days, and now he looked decadent. His face was a little more ferocious, and his eyes were like arrows shining with cold light. Even a man would be frightened by Pang Xiao's momentum, let alone Miss 8, a little girl. Miss 8 stepped back again and again until her back was against the wall of the door. She stuttered, "No one's idea." Liar. Pang Xiao saw that she was so frightened, so he didn't want to say anything more. He just said, "The person who asked you to serve tea didn't have good intentions. Although you are born of a concubine, your uncle is the minister of the Ministry of Rights. With this identity, you are qualified to be a wife in the future. The person who asked you to serve tea wanted you to be a concubine. You're not a concubine anymore. As your brother-in-law, I also advise you that you don't have to listen to anyone in the future. You should think more about yourself." Speaking of this, Pang Xiao waved his hand and said, "You can go." Miss 8 not only blushed, but also her eyes were red. With tears falling down, she turned and walked out. Who knew that just as she reached the corridor, she ran into Qin Huayuan. She didn't know how much he had heard here. Miss 8 was so ashamed that she lowered her head and hurriedly saluted, calling him uncle. Qin Huayuan said, "Go and tell Madame Dowager that she should take good care of her body and don't get involved in the outside affairs. Only then can she recover quickly." The 8th young mistress nodded, and her tears flowed even more fiercely. She sobbed and ran away. Qin Huayuan had lost a lot of weight in recent days. The dark blue daoist robe on his body looked like it was hanging on a clothes rack, making his figure look even more slender and more otherworldly. Seeing the slovenly Pang Xiao, Qin Huayuan could not help but sigh. It seemed that Pang Xiao didn't have a good time recently. "You've come. Father-in-law." Pang Xiao came forward and bowed with his hands cupped. Qin Huayuan sighed and helped Pang Xiao up. "We're all family. You don't have to do this. You're here all of a sudden. Do you have news about Sister Yi?" Qin Huayuan was always so sharp. Pang Xiao did not keep him in suspense. He handed the note to Qin Huayuan. "This is news from Mu Jinghu. He is now in Taitan and has seen Sister Yi." Qin Huayuan read the note carefully several times, as if he wanted to disassemble and reassemble every word to ensure that what he saw was real and not an illusion. "Are you sure this is news from Mr. Mu?" "I'm sure. His daughter was safe." Qin Huayuan's shoulders relaxed in an instant, and his tense nerves also relaxed. "It's really good news." Qin Huayuan sighed deeply and closed his eyes. He only had one daughter. When he heard that she was missing, he was so anxious that he wanted to look for her himself. Later, when he heard that Jing Zhe and the others came back and told him about the situation in the cave, Qin Huayuan felt that it was more ominous than auspicious. Now that he knew that Qin Yining had gone to Taitan, how could Qin Huayuan not understand? It seems that the Taitan wanted the treasure, so they sneaked in quietly. They have been following us for a long time. "You're right, father-in-law. I was too careless, so this situation happened. I should have set up the defense carefully. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been unaware that the Taitan had already gone deep into the disaster area." Pang Xiao regretted it. If he had a chance to do it all over again, he would rather defy the imperial edict than bring Qin Yining out. Qin Huayuan smiled and comforted him. "It's not your fault. Your Majesty quietly arranged the imperial carriage around the old capital. How could you dare to act rashly? Moreover, the situation in the disaster area was already tense. The people lacked medicine and the relief from the imperial court had not arrived. You had to deal with the people who could riot at any time. There were too many things to consider and you couldn't care about anything else." What Qin Huayuan said was the real situation at that time. However, he lost Sister Yi. No matter what the reason was, this was unforgivable. Qin Huayuan stretched out his arm and patted Pang Xiao's shoulder. Don't take all the blame for yourself. Pang Xiao's heart was sour and swollen. His eyes were red. At this time, he would rather Qin Huayuan beat him fiercely and scold him a few times. The more understanding and forgiving he was, the more guilty Pang Xiao felt. Qin Huayuan shook his head and sighed. All right, since you're married to Yi you'll be considered my son as long as you address me as your father-in-law. I'll be honest with you. Even if something happens to Sister Yi, you're still half my son. This is an indisputable fact. If I lose Sister Yi, this daughter, I can't lose you, this son. Otherwise, wouldn't this old man be at a loss? Even if you remarry in the future, don't you still have to call me father-in-law when you see me? Fortunately, Sister Yi is fine now. Everyone is happy. Don't blame yourself. This matter isn't your fault. Now, the most important thing is that we discuss what to do next and how to ensure Sister Yi's safety. Pang Xiao was moved. After a long time, he suppressed his surging emotions and said seriously, the Taytan people should have been eyeing the whereabouts of the treasure for a long time. This time, they captured Sister Yi. I'm afraid they just happened to come across it. At that time, the situation in the cave was very complicated. Sai Qin brought people and suddenly arrived. Seeing that the important people were all there, they simply took them all out. Qin Huayuan continued, I just don't know how the people of the Qingtian Alliance are now. However, according to my guess, the people of the Qingtian Alliance who were captured should be in a bad situation. Qin Huayuan nodded and said, I think so too. Otherwise, with the attraction of the treasure, it's impossible that the Taytan people don't care about the whereabouts of the treasure at all after 4 months. With the Taytan people's attention to the treasure, they will definitely think of ways to use Sister Yi and the second master of the Lu family to negotiate with us. Pang Xiao said with some worry, it's just that I'm in a very tense situation now. Your Majesty still hasn't said anything about me disobeying the imperial edict more than 30 times. During this period of time, he has been impatient and offended many people. I'm afraid that Your Majesty doesn't care about Sister Yi and the others' lives. The most important thing is that Grand Secretary Lu's health is very poor now. The change of power in the Lu family is also at a critical juncture. I'm afraid that the second master of the Lu family will also be abandoned by the Lu family. Qin Huayuan stood up and paced with his hands behind his back. Sister Yi is a woman. I think that other than us family members who care about her, others will only see her as an accessory. Even if the Taytan people want to negotiate, they will put the Lu family first. If they can't get the treasure, they can ask for a ransom or other benefits. If the Lu family gives up, Sister Yi's situation will be even worse. Wang Yi. Wang Yi. At this moment, Huzi ran in from outside and stuffed a carrier pigeon into Pang Xiao's hands. Look, it's from Mr. Mu. Pang Xiao hurriedly stood up and tore the small paper roll from the carrier pigeon's leg. He hurriedly unfolded it and read. There were 3 words on it. Kill the Khan, escape. Father-in-law. Pang Xiao frowned and handed the note to Qin Huayuan. Qin Huayuan murmured after reading it, what does this mean? The Khan was killed. No, could it be? Who killed the Khan and escaped? Sister Yi? It must be Sister Yi. Otherwise, Mr. Mu wouldn't have sent you a letter. Sister Yi is not a reckless person. She must have her reasons for killing the Khan. But now, the power must have fallen into the hands of the Emperor's son-in-law, Sai Qin. He is a ruthless person and will definitely use this matter to make a big fuss. Qin Huayuan could already imagine Sai Qin's actions. He had collected a lot of information about Sai Qin and knew his ambitious temperament. I'm afraid it won't be good if this continues. Let's not talk about whether Sister Yi killed the Khan is true or not. Even if it's false, this news came from Mr. Mu. I'm sure everyone in the Taytan is certain of this. In my opinion, Sai Qin will definitely use this as a pretext to make a fuss. He will seize power first and then plot something else. Qin Huayuan said, perhaps even the killing of the Khan was part of Sai Qin's plan. Pang Xiao nodded in agreement. Both father and son-in-law fell into deep thought and anxiety. If the news of Qin Yining killing the Khan had spread throughout the Taitan, regardless of what Sai Qin's conditions for Daju were, Qin Yining's situation in the Taitan would be very dangerous. The two men looked at each other and anxiously discussed the various possibilities and countermeasures. At this time, Qin Yining's body was much better. He and Sai Qin were hiding in the Minuo tribe. After interacting with each other for a few days, Qin Yining realized that the Minuo tribe members were actually very warm-hearted and honest people. For example, the two brothers, Harbala and Chagan Bala, because they were the sons of the former patriarch, they were more or less involved in politics, so they were a little scheming. However, the punishment they received for using their brains to do things was quite straightforward in Qin Yining and Lu Heng's eyes. It was even more obvious that they did not have any bad intentions. Because the two brothers had special statuses and were young, Anari wanted to keep them alive to humiliate them, so they were not killed. However, the humiliation they suffered and the hatred of their parents' death were deeply rooted in their hearts. They were also people who kept their promises. At that time, they had sworn that whoever could kill Anari and avenge their tribe leader and tribesmen would be the next tribe leader. Therefore, even though Harbala and Chagan Bala were not very happy, they still treated Lu Heng and Qin Yining as the new tribe leaders. Especially Sai Qin, who held a very high position in their hearts. Just like that, a few days passed. The entire capital was turned upside down, but there was no result. Sai Qin was busy gradually grasping the power in his hands. He could only instruct his subordinates to supervise the search. After turning the entire capital upside down, there was still no trace of the murderer. Back to Sai Qin. Sai Qin frowned and thought for a moment, then said, "Investigate again. Pay special attention to the involvement of the tribes that were exterminated by the Khan. For example, the Minuo tribe. They hold a grudge against the Khan and are very likely to be in cahoots with the murderer." His subordinates obeyed and went straight to the slums in the city. "Oh no, they're here." A little girl in ragged clothes ran in from outside the door and tugged at Harbala, saying, "The soldiers are here. They'll be here soon." Chapter 501. Qin Yining and Lu Heng were both cautious people. Because they were running for their lives, they always had their bags ready. As soon as they saw Harbala rush in with a face full of anxiety, the two of them immediately picked up their bags. Lu Heng said anxiously as he ran, "Are there pursuers?" Harbala nodded. "This time, they're not searching from house to house. They're coming straight for us. It's very likely that they already know you're in the Minuo tribe." Hearing this, Lu Heng pulled Harbala to a stop. "If that's the case, we're probably surrounded. If we leave from the side alley, we'll probably be caught immediately." Harbala was shocked. His face was pale as he looked around. Qin Yining didn't know what they were talking about, but seeing Lu Heng and Harbala's expressions, he knew the severity of the situation. She asked Lu Heng about the situation in a low voice. After Lu Heng explained in detail, Qin Yining also found it difficult to handle. "I'm afraid it's not that simple. If the pursuers are really coming straight for us, it must be because Sai Qin finally found the time to think about our whereabouts after balancing the power in the court. The city gates are tightly guarded and it's very difficult to escape. Sai Qin also predicted that we wouldn't be able to escape so easily, so he concluded that someone must have hidden us." "You're right. Someone who would take the risk to hide us must have a blood feud with Anari. The Minuo tribe is the prime suspect." Lu Heng was so anxious that his face was pale. At this critical moment, he and Qin Yining were the same. No matter how smart they were, it was useless. When the pursuers really surrounded them, they could only wait to be captured. It wasn't easy for them to get to this point. If they were captured, it would be too much. Moreover, with Sai Qin in control, if they were sent back to Sai Qin's side, other than being used as a bargaining chip to blackmail Daju, they wouldn't have a good ending. Harbala gritted his teeth. He was caught in a dilemma. He even thought, if he hadn't taken these two in back then. No, in the Minuo tribe, there were no cowards who would retreat without a fight, no cowards who would go back on their words. Back then, since they had made a deadly vow that whoever could avenge Bu and EG would be the new clan leader of the Minuo tribe, they should have spat their saliva like a nail, and should not have any hesitation. At worst, He would just die. Thinking of this, Harbala grabbed Sai Chin's hand and said firmly, "Let's rush out later. I'll lure them away while you guys escape." "No." Lu Heng sternly refused. "I can't let you take the risk alone. Listen, if they really do find us, just pretend that you don't recognize us. Just say that the two of us escaped here on our own accord, and that you didn't intend to shelter us. If we're captured, they might use us to negotiate with Daju. You might not die, but if you resist, you'll definitely die." "No. Both of you are the current clan leaders of the Minuo tribe. We, the Minuo tribe, have never allowed our clan leaders to take risk. But you still have clansmen, not only the 30-plus old, weak, sick, and disabled living here. There are over 4,000 clansmen of your Minuo clan waiting for you and your brothers to save them. If anything happens to you, the Minuo clan might never be able to recover." Harbala stubbornly pulled Lu Heng. Although he was a little afraid, he did not back down. Qin Yining did not understand what they were arguing about. Just as he was about to ask, he saw Chagan Bala rush out of the house. When he saw the three of them, he immediately pulled them to the firewood shed in the corner. He lifted the firewood and revealed a large vat in the corner. He first fiddled with the vat for a long time, then took out the bottom of the vat. "Go in, quickly," Chagan Bala urged them. Harbala took the lead, followed by Lu Heng and Qin Yining. Under the vat was a very spacious cellar. After Chagan Bala put the bottom of the vat back in place, he covered it with a large pile of firewood. Then, he carried the firewood and turned to go back into the house, as if it was not normal to come out to get firewood. Who knew that when he reached the door, he would run into the group of people who were searching inside. "Where are they? Tell me, where did you hide them?" Chagan Bala was so scared that he almost dropped the firewood. He shook his head in horror. "What are you talking about? Who are they? Don't play dumb with me. Those two people from Daju, a man and a woman, where did you hide them?" "This big brother, I really don't know. Our lives are already like this. After such a big thing happened in the city, we can't even eat a full meal. How can we have spare food to feed two strangers?" The officer glared at Chagan Bala, as if he wanted to stare two holes in his skinny body. "Don't think that we don't know what you are thinking. First, the Khan was wise and mighty, and he wiped out your Minuo tribe. Then, you, Abu and Erji, were eaten by wolves during a hunt. You are not willing to accept this. Perhaps you are waiting for an opportunity to take revenge. Now that the two criminals who killed the Khan of Anari have escaped, will you not help them? Sir, please do us a favor and don't slander us." Chagan Bala was very helpless and wronged. He threw the firewood and said dejectedly, "What we are thinking about now is how to fill our stomachs and how to survive. How can we be in the mood to think about other things? Something happened to the Khan and we are also very sad. But even if you can't catch the assassins, you can't put such a big crime on us. Brother, why are you talking nonsense with them? Let's search." Seeing that the two of them were talking enthusiastically, the people who accompanied them came up to remind them. The leader also did not have the patience to argue with Chagan Bala and immediately ordered people to search. Chagan Bala lowered his head as if he was extremely wronged. But he was so nervous that he could not think straight. When the pursuers approached the firewood, his heart thumped. When they walked further away, he felt a little more relaxed. When they came closer again, he became more nervous. He controlled his emotions and did not dare to show the slightest bit of uneasiness. But when he saw those people sticking the tip of their swords into the firewood pile, they first stirred and found that there was no one hiding in it. They even lifted the firewood and cut the grass. In the corner, there was a big fat jar standing there. "Sir, there is a jar here, but it is empty." "Empty?" Everyone went forward and saw that it was a big jar covered in dust and abandoned. They could not help but feel bored. This kind of jar was very heavy. Usually, when it was placed in a corner, no one would move it. The officers who were searching were also not interested in doing the hard work. They only looked around and saw that there was no hiding place. They could not help but feel a little discouraged. There were even people who kicked the big jar fiercely, but the jar did not move at all. Chagan Bala was about to break out in cold sweat when he saw this, but he still forced himself to be calm. Chapter 502. They squatted down in the cellar and used a stone brick to prop up the bottom of the vat. In addition, the vat was made so tightly that no one suspected that it was the entrance to a cellar. The people searching impatiently focused their attention on the broken vat. As if venting their anger, they picked up a stone that was casually thrown aside and threw it at the vat. With a crisp sound, the large vat was smashed into pieces. The pursuers all laughed heartily, as if they had encountered something worth being happy about. Seeing that the Minuo tribe's residence was only so big and that they had searched everywhere, there was no place to hide. The leader had no choice but to retreat with his people. In the cellar, Qin Yining, Lu Heng, and Harbala heard the footsteps and gradually breathed a sigh of relief. However, they did not dare to act rashly. They still held the entrance of the cave and did not dare to reveal any flaws. Outside, Chaganbara frowned and sent the soldiers away with a pained expression on his face. The soldiers who were being searched were smashed with a jar for no reason. Small people like them did not dare to have any complaints, lest they cause more trouble. When the soldiers saw Chaganbala's cowardice, they felt even more satisfied, as if they had received a great sense of accomplishment. After these people had left, Chaganbala did not dare to go to the backyard. Instead, he went to the front hall and huddled with his tribesmen to keep warm. He also secretly warned these people not to reveal the secret. In the cellar, Qin Yining asked Lu Heng in a low voice, what were they talking about outside just now? Because the cellar was very spacious and there was a ventilation hole, it was much warmer in the northern Taytan tribe's cellar than outside. Lu Heng could not see Qin Yining's face clearly in the dark, but he still groped his way closer to her and whispered in her ear what he had heard. Qin Yining listened attentively and said with a frown, I don't think this is the end. With Sai Qin's cautiousness and cunning, it's very likely that he has already set up an inescapable net outside. They didn't find anything this time because they didn't expect the Minuo tribe to have a cellar. When Sai Qin is forced into a corner, they will make their move. I think so too. It's just that if we leave the cellar now, it's very likely that we'll be seen by the spies they left behind. Chaganbara can't go and observe if the people searching have retreated. Qin Yining said, then let's wait here for a while. We'll think of a way to get out when it's late at night. Lu Heng nodded in agreement. Halbara didn't understand what they were talking about, so Lu Heng explained to him in a low voice. We can't stay here any longer. If he didn't think of a way to leave now, he might be caught by Sai Qin. At that time, the Minuo tribe will be in danger. Halbara bit his nails nervously. It was as if he was trying to make a decision. After a long time, Halbara said, at night, we'll think of a way to get out of here and leave Dardu. You're leaving Dardu too? Lu Heng said worriedly, your Minuo clan still has so many clansmen. You need to protect them as well. If you go against Si Qin, who is as cunning as a fox, with his vicious and merciless nature, I'm afraid you will only end up dead in the future. I advise you to be careful. You have to make sure everyone's lives are safe. Halbara was touched and smiled. I knew I didn't save the wrong people. I know that both of you are decent people. You won't abandon us for the sake of your own safety. Lu Heng rolled his eyes helplessly. You're still in the mood to have fun at a time like this. If it weren't for your help, we would have been captured long ago. We've been with each other all this time, and we're all blood brothers. If we do something to betray the Minuo tribe, can we still be considered human? Halbara was so touched that he sniffled. To be honest, they hadn't known Lu Heng and Qin Yining for long. For a moment, when they were being searched, he regretted it. He even thought that if they were really searched, they would definitely find a way to escape first. At that time, they wouldn't care about the Minuo tribe. But the reality was that they were still upholding their morals. The Taytan had been doing business with Daju for many years, and had a bad impression of the people of Daju. They felt that the people of Daju were cunning and treacherous, and that they shouldn't be associated with them. But now, he had seen through them completely. There were honest people in Daju, and there were despicable people in Taytan like Anari. The three of them huddled in the cellar, quietly listening to the movements outside and talking in low voices. Qin Yining and Halbara didn't speak the same language, so Lu Heng acted as their translator. It was a peaceful scene. Soon, It was late at night. Just as Qin Yining and Lu Heng were thinking about whether or not they should go out, they suddenly heard Chaganbara's low voice. "It's fine. Come out quickly. The people patrolling around have already left." Hearing this, the three of them immediately squatted down and moved to the entrance of the cave. They moved the bottom of the vat and other things away, and climbed out with dirty faces. Qin Yining shivered in the cold night wind as she breathed in the damp and hard smell of the soil in the air. Chaganbara pulled them quickly into the house. The few of them sat down around the bonfire, and some of the clansmen served them piping hot rice soup and dry biscuits. Qin Yining ate a few bites of the biscuits with the hot rice soup, then said in a low voice, "I don't know if the curfew in the city is still as strict as before. If it's relaxed even a little, let's get out of the city quickly. Everything can wait until we're out of the city." Lu Heng nodded and told Qin Yining's words to the people around them. When the tribesmen of the Minuo tribe heard this, they couldn't help but fall into deep thought. Especially Halbala and Chaganbara. Back then, the one who could take revenge would be the chief of the Minuo tribe. This was an oath that they had sworn in front of their ancestors. Naturally, the two brothers were not cowards who were afraid of death. Although it was a little awkward to have two Daeju tribesmen as the chief, after spending some time together, they had a deep understanding of Lu Heng's temperament and methods. They also had a real trust in their characters. If the Minuo tribe was led by such a smart and knowledgeable person, even if their tribe would no longer be as prosperous as before, and they would no longer have a large grassland with abundant water and grass, the tribesmen who survived would still be able to live a good life. Second Master Lu, I've also told you before that the people of the Minuo tribe will never go back on their words. Now, Second Master Lu and Princess Consort Lu are the chiefs of our tribe. From now on, everything will be entrusted to you. Chapter 503. Hearing this, Lu Heng declined, "I understand your good intentions, and I also feel your sincerity, but we are people of the great Zhu dynasty after all. If we become the tribe leaders of the Minuo tribe, wouldn't that mean that the Minuo tribe would become part of the great Zhu dynasty? We are friends and brothers. I can't do that to the Minuo tribe. We can be good friends for generations and support each other, but you two brothers are the true masters of the Minuo tribe. I believe that your parents in heaven will approve of this decision." Everyone was moved by these words. Harbala and Chaganbara thought of their parents who had died tragically, and tears welled up in their eyes. But since they had made the decision, they couldn't go back on it. This was a matter of honor and morality. Qin Yining listened to them speak like pearls, but she didn't understand what they meant. If they spoke slower, she could understand some simple words and make some guesses. Lu Heng explained to Qin Yining. Qin Yining thought about it and agreed with Lu Heng's decision. After all, they were outsiders, and she had learned her lesson from the Qingtian alliance. She didn't dare to take over any organization now, because while it brought benefits, there might be a greater danger behind it. Now isn't the time to discuss this. What we need to think about is how to escape. Today, there are already pursuers searching, which means that Saiqin is free. If there's another citywide search, I'm afraid we won't be able to escape so easily, and the Minuo tribe will be implicated. If the Minuo tribe is targeted, the consequences will be unthinkable. Lu Heng also frowned and nodded, "You're right. The problem is that if we escape from the city, we'll have to face pursuers. I'm afraid that the road leading to Daeju and the Taitan border from here will be inconvenient." Qin Yining pursed her lips and said in a low voice, "Do we have to enter the desert again?" Lu Heng thought about the suffering they had suffered along the way and couldn't help but shiver. But after careful analysis, if they had really escaped from the city, with Saiqin's intelligence and Tian Jiz's calculations, it would have been impossible for them to not leave any traces behind. They would definitely alert a large number of pursuers to search for them. If they took the main road, it would be easy for them to catch up. However, if they were to walk in the desert, and if they were fully prepared, their chances of escaping would be very high. The weather was getting colder, and it was getting harder to walk in the desert. They needed to be more comprehensive in their preparations. Lu Heng pursed his lips and discussed this decision with Chaganbala and his brothers. The two of them frowned as they listened. However, After carefully listening to Lu Heng's analysis, he also felt that if they could leave the city, the desert could indeed help them escape the pursuit. In that case, let's get ready. I'll leave the city tomorrow and secretly contact the people outside the city. I'll ask them if they're willing to migrate with us. After leaving the capital and arriving at the border, there was a vast but sparsely populated area, so there was bound to be room for survival. To enter the desert, we must be well prepared, Chaganbara said. Halbara frowned. That's easy, but how can we secretly bring you out? Qin Yining pursed his pale lips and said after a while, lure the tiger away from the mountain. Lu Heng smiled and nodded. Great minds think alike. The Khan's funeral was grand, but because it happened so suddenly, it was also rough. Because the members of the Taytan imperial family had long been dead or maimed when Anari was still the regent, not a single one of them was alive. In addition, Qin's reputation for benevolence and bravery spread far and wide, and the courtiers were all in favor of Qin's ascension to the throne. After a short period of preparation and a grand succession ceremony, with the military power in her hands and the people's hearts in favor, she did not need to spend too much effort to reorganize. The Tatar political power was firmly in the hands of Qin. At the beginning of Qin's reign, he changed the name of his reign to Jianan. Because Qin's surname was Utki, he was called Utki Khan. He also issued a proclamation, vowing to avenge Anari Khan and ordering the entire country to hunt down the murderer of Anari Khan. He also wrote a letter to Daeju, condemning Daeju for the crime of assassinating Anari Khan, and threatened to make them pay with blood. For a time, the hatred of the Taytan people was completely aroused. On one hand, everyone vowed to avenge Anari Khan. On the other hand, the people were moved by Utki Khan's benevolence, and the people were united like never before. All the Taytan people praised Utki Khan's wisdom and martial prowess. In the evening, Qin received a report from his subordinates that they had found the whereabouts of Qin Yining and Lu Heng, and that they had been surrounded. When Qin heard this, he immediately ordered, "Go and capture them alive. Ben Khan wants to kill them by 1,000 cuts as an offering to Anari Khan's soul in heaven." "Yes." His subordinates replied and turned to leave. Qin said, "Wait, Ben Khan will go personally." Qin changed into a light robe and led his men straight to the location of the informant. All the guards and attendants secretly sighed with emotion at the deep love between Qin and Anari Khan. They rushed to a remote courtyard in the south of the city. Qin saw that his men were all around, and the courtyard was pitch black. Qin sneered and urged his horse forward, "Bring out the people inside." Yes. Everyone rushed forward and rushed in with an unstoppable force. Soon, a woman's scream could be heard from inside. Not long after, under the moonlight, two figures, one tall and one short, could be seen being pushed out. Perhaps it was because they had been homeless for a long time, but their robes were barely recognizable as excellent brocade in the past. However, they were now in tatters and their hair was disheveled. Qin spoke in Daeju language. "Second Master Lu, Ben Khan originally thought that you were a trustworthy friend and trusted you so much. I didn't expect you to be so unappreciative and betray us for a woman. You've truly disappointed Ben Khan." Lu Heng lowered his head and trembled slightly. Qin narrowed his eyes and immediately felt that something was wrong. He jumped off his horse and strode forward to grab Qin Yining by the hair. However, what he saw was a woman's face covered in scars. The woman's eyes were filled with hatred and she immediately stabbed the dagger hidden in her sleeve. Qin was furious and immediately realized that he had been tricked. He viciously kicked the woman's chest. Before the dagger could cut through Qin's skin, the woman's chest caved in from the kick and she flew 20 feet away. She fell to the ground and spat out blood as she died. The tall Qin next to him was so frightened that his entire body trembled and he fell to the ground. Qin grabbed him by the collar and lifted him up. He discovered that this was an old man about 50 to 60 years old and one of his eyes was blind. "What a Minuo tribe! Quickly, send people to guard the city gates." "Immediately. As you command." The attendants rushed to each of the 4 city gates to deliver the message as if their butts were on fire. However, it was time to close the city gates. The city guards did not notice anything amiss and could not remember who had entered or left the city today. They could only tighten the security from now on. Chapter 504. When Sai Qin gave the order, he had already guessed that the Minuo tribe had already made preparations. Even if they sent people to search for them, they would find nothing. However, he did not expect that the Minuo tribe's encampment outside the city was already empty. Not even a shadow was left behind. The person who reported to Sai Qin nervously observed the Khan's expression, fearing that Sai Qin would kill him in a fit of anger. Anari Khan had always been a hot-tempered person. It was common for him to kill people in a fit of anger. Although the new Khan was benevolent and righteous, who could guarantee that he would not change after ascending to the throne? However, Sai Qin dispelled his worries in the next moment. He was indeed as the rumors said. Although he was enraged by the Minuo tribe's betrayal, he did not implicate his subordinates. He even said gently, "Thank you for your hard work." This warmed the hearts of the people who had lived under Anari's ruthlessness for a long time. A high and mighty Khan could actually speak to them in such an amiable and approachable manner. They were truly touched. Because of this, the people who searched for them became even more meticulous. They dug 3 feet into the ground of the Minuo tribe's residence in the city. Finally, they found a cellar under the broken vat. The people were wringing their hands. They had smashed the vat that day, but they had not thought of carefully inspecting the cellar. If they had been more careful that day, they might have been able to catch the 2 murderers. Everyone in the Minuo tribe had disappeared. After confirming this, Sai Qin ordered the search team to withdraw from the city. He said, "There is no need to search in the city. They must have escaped with the Minuo tribe. It's impossible for such a large group to disappear for no reason. There aren't many young and strong people left in their group. The remaining people are a group of old and weak women and children. It won't be easy for them to move around. Moreover, in such cold weather, they must have left behind traces of their lives. Pay attention to these traces and don't miss any clues." Because the Khan did not pursue the matter, these hot-blooded men felt even more moved and guilty. They felt that because of their own mistake, the murderer of Anari Khan had escaped, and the Khan did not blame them. If they did not take this matter seriously, they would not be able to live up to their conscience. While Sai Qin's men were busy searching for the whereabouts of the Minuo tribe, Qin Yining, Lu Heng, and the Halbara brothers were leading the Minuo tribe through the snow-covered wilderness. Qin Yining said worriedly to Lu Heng, "It's impossible for such a large group to not leave any traces behind. We can only hope that they will slow down." Lu Heng stepped on the snow with uneven steps. The snow creaked under his feet as he panted in exhaustion. At this time, the sky was already dark, and the night wind was strong in the wilderness. The fine xiao shui gradually turned into goose-feather snowflakes, and when the cold wind blew on their faces, it was like a knife cutting through their skin. Everyone was shivering from the cold. Qin Yining and Lu Heng were better off. Although they weren't wearing silk or satin, they were still wearing cotton-padded clothes. In this weather where the water turned into ice, they could grit their teeth and endure it. However, the women and children behind them, who had worked hard for more than a year as Anari's subordinates, were all wearing old and tattered clothes. Some of them were even wearing straw sandals, and their toes and skin were red and festering from the cold. In such conditions, how could they pass through the desert where the temperature difference between day and night was so great? "You're right." Harbala gritted his teeth and looked at the bleak surroundings, rubbing his fingers that were red from the cold. "We can't continue like this. If we continue, I'm afraid no one will be able to withstand the test of the desert. We were originally running for our lives, and if this drags on, the entire tribe might collapse." Chagan Bala nodded, and his tongue was tied from the cold. "Why don't we set up camp today, and let everyone warm themselves first? We can calm down and think of a plan." Actually, at this juncture, they really shouldn't stop. They should continue moving forward. However, in the current situation, they were afraid that before the pursuers arrived, some of them would die. If their tribesmen died like this, they would be heartbroken. It would be a pity. More importantly, if such a thing happened, it would be a heavy blow to everyone's hearts. After all, who would have the courage to resist Saiqin's men in the future? It was really a dilemma. In order to save the lives of the majority, everyone had to stop and set up camp. They used the materials they had brought to build simple tents. The 4,000 people started to work in full swing. Although they were in the cold and snow and were hungry, when they heard that they could rest, everyone started to work enthusiastically. Qin Yining, Lu Heng, Chagan Bala, Harbala, and a few other senior members of the tribe, as well as a general who had lost an arm, all gathered in Harbala's tent. A bonfire was lit in the middle of the ground, and everyone gathered around it in silence. Qin Yining didn't understand Taitan, so he could only rely on Lu Heng for negotiations. Lu Heng covered his mouth and coughed for a while, coughing until his face was red. Then he said, "What I mean is that we can't let our tribesmen lose their lives for no reason. In such a large migration, even if we are well prepared, accidents can happen. Moreover, there are pursuers behind us. I also mean that." The uncle with the broken arm, Ahan, said, "It's almost impossible for all of our tribesmen to charge through the desert. My suggestion is to leave some men behind to protect the old, weak, women, and children who can't continue with the migration. Let them find a deserted place nearby and live there temporarily. Wait for the good news from us." Harbala nodded and said, "I agree with Uncle Ahan's words. The rest of the people will cross the desert together and go to the border of Daju to find a place to live. After settling down, we can come back to pick up our tribesmen. But if we do this, won't our tribesmen feel abandoned?" Chagan Bala said worriedly, "It wasn't easy for us to survive. If we are abandoned by our tribesmen, won't the people who stayed behind be sad? But if we bring them along, they will definitely die. If we stay, the new Khan might give us a way out, seeing that we are all pitiful women and children." Lu Heng looked at Qin Yining, who was silent at the side, and translated their conversation for her. Qin Yining thought for a moment and said, "Actually, the temporary anger is not because we are abandoning everyone. We are planning to cross the desert, but because we want to find a better way out for everyone. That's why we are taking such a risk. The Minuo tribe used to be so powerful, and lived a self-sufficient life. But now, they were living a slave life that was worse than pigs and dogs. Even a horse that Anna raised every day was more expensive than a human being. If everyone stays, maybe we can survive. But do we really only want to struggle at death's door? Do we really not care if the Minuo tribe can be revived?" The rest of the people in the tent didn't understand Qin Yining's words, but Uncle Ahan with the broken arm understood. He said in the not-so-fluent Great Jew language, "You're right. We can't be the Khan's slaves forever. The Minuo tribe is a big tribe. If we completely decline and disappear, we won't be able to face our ancestors when we die." Qin Yining nodded with a smile. "Uncle, you are right. We only live for one breath. Struggling at death's door is not living. If we give in now, then in the future, our descendants will have to live under the Khan's oppression. One generation will be slaves, and the next generation will be slaves. If that happens, our descendants will be too pitiful. We are fighting now for one breath, for our descendants to be able to live with their heads held high. Men, women, old people, children, a complete tribe. None of these people can be left out. Every one of them is the hope of the tribe. Although I suggest leaving those who are physically unable to move outside the desert, most of them will be the elderly, women, and children. However, this group of people will be the greatest force that can rebuild the Minuo tribe once they have settled down in the future." Chapter 505. Lu Heng looked at Qin Yining with a burning gaze and nodded approvingly. "You're right." His throat felt dry and itchy. He coughed a few more times before continuing. "I believe that if we tell this to all the tribesmen, everyone will understand the meaning behind it and agree with our approach." While he was talking to Qin Yining, Uncle Ahan had already conveyed the meaning behind Qin Yining's words to the Harbala brothers and the others who didn't understand Daju's language. Everyone nodded as they listened. Their faces were full of praise and they looked moved. They were all worried. They were running away and being chased like stray dogs. What awaited them was not a smooth journey. What awaited them was an even harsher desert. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that there was a wolf in front and a tiger behind them. They were worried and hesitant. But no matter how many knots they had in their hearts, Qin Yining's clear analysis could not be clearer. They were the future hope of the Minuo tribe. They shouldered the heavy burden of revitalizing the Minuo tribe. They wanted everyone in the tribe to live. They did not want to sacrifice the weak women, the elderly, and the children now. Bringing them into the desert was purely impulsive. It was equivalent to taking their lives. They discussed for a while more, then split up and went to their respective tents to convey the meaning of their words. Not to mention the reaction of the tribesmen after hearing these words, Qin Yining saw that everyone had left the tent. Then he asked Lu Heng with concern, "I saw that you've been coughing all day. You must have choked on the cold wind during the journey. I still have some medicine for reducing fever and clearing internal heat that I took a few days ago. Take them first. Don't get too sick. We still have to cross the desert. If you get sick, your body won't be able to take it." As Qin Yining spoke, he opened the bag he carried with him and rummaged through it. Lu Heng looked at Qin Yining's extremely thin figure wrapped in thick cotton clothes. His gaze was extremely deep and soft. She was concerned about him. He felt very happy. Lu Heng was a shrewd man. He started from scratch and was influenced by the scheming thoughts of some businessmen. However, he was also a person of good character and had a bottom line when doing things. Ever since the first time he met Qin Yining, he had been attracted by her appearance. As he got to know her better, he was deeply impressed by her intelligence, resourcefulness, and decisiveness. Even though he had been tricked by the fake map, he didn't hate her at all. Instead, he found it funny and felt a little happy that he had met his match. He knew that Qin Yining's heart belonged to someone else, and because she was a married woman, she stuck to her principles. However, although he could control himself and not do anything that crossed the boundary of friendship, he couldn't stop his feelings from rising bit by bit. On the road of escape, he watched her in such a difficult circle, but she never complained, never complained. When she faced a Nari's harsh criticism, even when she was injured, even when she was facing death, the stubbornness in her eyes had never been extinguished. Even now, when everyone was afraid of crossing the desert, she had never changed her mind. His heart started to lean towards her more and more uncontrollably. Even if he couldn't have this person, being able to be her friend was also something that made him happy. Qin Yining found the medicine. When she turned around, she met Lu Heng's gentle eyes under the orange glow of the bonfire. She was in a good mood and didn't have any other thoughts. She smiled and said, "I found it. I'll go get some clean snow and melt it for you to boil the medicine. You don't have to worry. Since we've stopped to rest, we should take this opportunity to take the medicine and rest well." Lu Heng smiled and nodded, "I'll listen to you. Sorry to trouble you." Qin Yining smiled, "You don't have to be so polite. We're considered friends who have gone through life and death together. You saved my life, and I haven't thanked you properly. If it weren't for saving me, you would have already negotiated a cooperation with Sai Qin. You wouldn't have fallen to this point." Lu Heng shook his head and said, "Don't think like that. Actually, Sai Qin and I didn't have any specific conditions for cooperation. Even though we're in enemy territory, I know where I came from. How could I let Sai Qin take advantage of me? I've only been using ambiguous words to keep him in suspense and give him some hope so that he won't touch me for the time being. As for how Anari's death was used by him, it wasn't within our expectations. Who would think the same as a pervert who killed his first wife?" Qin Yining said, "Sai Qin will suffer retribution sooner or later for what he did. Even though he's happy now, I'm looking forward to seeing how he falls." Lu Heng smiled and said, "That's right. I also believe that if they were to fight on the battlefield, he might not be Wang Yi's match. If Prince Consort Ji joins the fray, Sai Qin would have no hope of winning." When she thought of Pang Xiao, she missed him like a tidal wave. However, Qin Yining would never be weak because of this. As long as she could grit her teeth and persevere, she would be able to overcome all difficulties. She would be able to see Pang Xiao very soon. She also believed that her father and Pang Xiao were already thinking of ways to save her. She knew that her family wouldn't give up on her. Qin Yining wasn't wrong. However, Pang Xiao and Qin Huayuan were in trouble. After Sai Qin ascended the throne, he sent a letter of credence to Da Ju, questioning Li Chitian for sending assassins to Taitan to assassinate a Nari Khan. He also threatened to pay with blood. When Li Chitian read the letter of credence, he was so angry that he threw it away. He immediately summoned Minister Lu, who was bedridden, into the palace. Together with Qin Huayuan and Pang Xiao, he angrily rebuked them. "You raised a good son and a good daughter. How dare you go to Taitan to assassinate the Taitan Khan? Minister Lu, you've been by my side for a long time. I trust you and the Lu family so much. Even when Lu Heng tried to steal the treasure map, I didn't suspect the Lu family at all. However, your precious grandson did such a thing. If he didn't want the treasure, how could he have been captured? Even after being captured, he didn't stop. He didn't wait for our envoys to negotiate with the Tartars. He actually dared to assassinate Anari Khan. Is he afraid that Da Ju is too stable? And Minister Qin, what a good daughter you have. It's pitiful that she was kidnapped, but she shouldn't have gone to Taitan to stir up trouble. She's just a woman who doesn't know how to live like a princess and wait for help. She actually dared to assassinate the Taitan Khan with the second son of the Lu family. Did she grow up eating bear's heart and leopard's guts? I really don't agree with such a woman who causes chaos in her family and country." With one last curse, Li Chitian smashed the teacup on the table. The porcelain shards fell to the ground with a loud shattering sound. All the eunuchs in the room, including Li Guanwen, fell to their knees and pressed their foreheads to the ground. They didn't even care if they were cut by the broken porcelain shards and didn't dare to say a word. Minister Lu knelt on the ground, panting heavily and trembling all over. No one knew if it was because he was terminally ill, or because he was angered by Lu Heng's unfilial son, or because he was angered by Li Chitian. Qin Huayuan, on the other hand, was kneeling in an upright and leisurely manner. His eyes were lowered, causing others to be unable to discern what he was thinking. However, no matter how they looked at it, they felt that he didn't feel the slightest bit of guilt. Pang Xiao knelt with a straight back. He didn't lower his head or look down. Instead, he looked at the table next to Li Chitian. There were 2 thick stacks of memorials on the table. He didn't say a word and no one knew what he was thinking. The treasures were lost, the national treasury was empty, and the Taitan had a new Khan. It was very likely that they would take this opportunity to start a war. Under such circumstances, Li Chitian was unprecedentedly annoyed. He thought that if he lost his temper, Pang Xiao, Qin Huayuan, and Minister Lu would definitely bow their heads and admit their mistakes. Then, he could take the opportunity to move forward and let the 3 of them find a way to solve this problem. Whether it was money or ideas, at least there would be someone to share the burden. Who knew that they wouldn't take the initiative? Li Chitian gritted his teeth and cursed in his heart, a bunch of foxes. He couldn't control his temper any longer. I really regret it. I knew that Prince Zhongshiren didn't like the Qin clan, but I still agreed to Minister Qin's requests. Look at how much trouble this woman from the Luan family has caused for us. She assassinated the Khan and started a war between the 2 countries. If a war really breaks out, who knows how many innocent people on the border will lose their lives. It's all the Qin clan's fault. Minister Qin, what do you think we should do? Li Chitian's voice grew louder and louder. It was so loud that the dust on Cheng Chen almost fell off. Qin Huayuan still didn't look angry. However, Pang Xiao suddenly stood up and said in a low voice, "Your Majesty." Pang Xiao had lost a lot of weight recently. Now, he looked dispirited and unshaven. In addition, his handsome face had become more and more chiseled, and the cold light in his slanted eyes couldn't be hidden. Coupled with his low and dignified voice, everyone in the imperial study couldn't help but feel a chill run down their spines. Li Chitian was also startled by Pang Xiao's sudden shout. Then, he said angrily, "Pang Xiao, are you trying to rebel?" Pang Xiao clenched his fists and looked Li Chitian in the eye. He said, "Your Majesty, be careful with your word. Your Majesty knows as well as this subject how the Qin clan was taken away. None of the people present were fools, and none of them were traitors, including my wife. She was also an innocent victim. How many holes has she created for the imperial court in order to relieve the disaster? How many lives has she saved? If it wasn't for her money and effort, and if it wasn't for father-in-law's support, there would have been a mass uprising in the old capital. If there really was a mass uprising, does your Majesty have the money to suppress it? Has your Majesty forgotten all of her contributions? Speaking of the assassination, do you think we'll believe whatever Sai-Chin says? Without seeing it with our own eyes, we can't be sure that Inari wasn't killed by our people. Sai-Chin is treacherous, cunning, and ambitious. His thirst for power made him endure humiliation and stay by Inari's side for so many years. Chapter 506. Li Qitian was choked by Pang Xiao's words. Although these reasons were obvious, and he understood them in his heart. But when Pang Xiao said it like this, it still made him seem unreasonable. Li Qitian felt that his dignity as an emperor had been violated. He strode forward angrily, grabbed Pang Xiao's collar, leaned close to his ear, and questioned harshly Pang Xiao. "Are you trying to rebel?" Pang Xiao calmly looked straight at Li Qitian and said in a deep voice, "If I was annoyed, I wouldn't have fallen to the point where I have to take the blame for someone else's kidnapping." "What do you mean?" Li Qitian glared at him. Pang Xiao was clearly telling him that if he had the intention to rebel, Li Qitian wouldn't even have the chance to sit on the throne now. These were indeed disgraceful words. But what was even more abominable was that these words were the truth. Anyone with discerning eyes could see that. When Pang Xiao said these words, all the servants in the room and the two old ministers heard it clearly. Pang Xiao was slapping him in the face. Li Qitian was so angry that his face turned red. His hand that grabbed Pang Xiao's collar couldn't help but tremble. For a long time, he couldn't say a word. Pang Xiao said sadly, "Big brother, you and I are sworn brothers. Don't you know what I'm thinking? I accepted the Qin clan without caring about the hatred of my father's murder because I love her. If I didn't really love her, how could I let the enemy's daughter marry into my family and take the enemy as my father-in-law? These are all in the past. I don't want to care about it anymore. I've been with Big Brother for so many years. Now that I finally have a stable life, I also want to live a stable life. But who would have thought that just after we got married, the Qin clan was taken away? Now that Sai-Chin, that bastard, is inexplicably saying that the Qin clan is the murderer of Inari. What's with his mouth and white teeth? Is everything he says the truth? I don't believe it. I don't accept it." Pang Xiao looked like a helpless child who had been bullied. He sat down weakly on the ground, his eyes red, as if he was about to cry. Li Qitian was stunned by his behavior. He was usually a domineering and cold person who killed countless enemies on the battlefield. Everyone called him evil spirit. But now, he looked like a helpless child. Such a strong contrast made Li Qitian not know what to do for a while. It seemed that if he continued to blame Pang Xiao, it would seem that he, as a monarch, was too ruthless. At this time, Pang Xiao's weakness stunned Li Guanwen and the others who were kneeling on the ground. They couldn't help but sigh that even heroes had a weakness for the charms of beautiful women. The Prince Zhongshuren was a domineering figure, but now he had a weak heroic spirit. Qin Huiyuan glanced at his aggrieved son-in-law from the corner of his eye, and then looked at Li Qitian. He couldn't help laughing in his heart, but he didn't show any clues on his face. Pang Xiao had always been like this. Sometimes, he would make a scene, swear in front of Li Qitian, and stubbornly resist the imperial edict. However, when he provoked Li Qitian so much that he wanted to kill him, he could still show his weakest side at the right time, making people sympathize with him. Li Qitian couldn't punish him heavily for the sake of his reputation. Only by having such a balance between tension and relaxation could he maximize his own benefits. Qin Huiyuan kowtowed at the right time and said sincerely, "Your Majesty, please don't be angry." Prince Zhongshuren was too worried these days. He was too angry and spoke a little impulsively. "Your Majesty, for the sake of his infatuation, please don't care about his childish temper." Li Qitian gnashed his teeth. Childish temper? He was already in his 20s. Among the common people, a man of this age would already be the father of a few children. How could he have the nerve to say that he was childish? However, if he were to argue with Pang Xiao now, wouldn't he be the one arguing with a child? In the hearts of the ministers, they would definitely think that he wasn't a mature person. Moreover, after losing his temper, Li Chitian had calmed down. He couldn't hold Pang Xiao accountable at this time. After all, he was a wise ruler, not a fatuous one. He couldn't disregard his reputation. Moreover, Taitan's current behavior was very obvious that they wanted to invade the south. Who knew when they would need to use Pang Xiao to kill the enemy? Pang Xiao and Ji Zhayu, these two great generals, were the great Zhou dynasty's stabilizing force. With them around, he had more confidence. Otherwise, in a large imperial court, where the court officials were divided into several factions, the treasury was empty, and the treasures were not found. If there was no one in the military who could compete with Si Qin, how could he sit on the throne in the future? Moreover, even if he didn't like Pang Xiao and wanted him dead, he wouldn't let others see through his intentions. Otherwise, he would be judged as murdering a meritorious official. He had thousands of ways to take Pang Xiao's life. The wisest choice was to do it when no one else knew. Thinking of this, Li Chitian supported Pang Xiao with both hands and pulled him up. Then, he said to Qin Huayuan and Minister Lu, "You may all rise." We were too anxious for a moment. Li Guanwen, take a seat, right ? Yes. The palace servants hurried over and quickly arranged the chairs in an orderly manner. Then, they helped the trembling Minister Lu up and sit down. Pang Xiao also sat down at the head of the table. His head was lowered, and no one knew what he was thinking. Li Chitian said, "Right now, regardless of whether or not there really was an assassination attempt, Si Qin's publicity is already very unfavorable to the great Zhou dynasty in the outside world. We believe that Si Qin has an ulterior motive. Your Majesty is wise." Qin Huayuan stood up and bowed. "In my humble opinion, Prince Zhengxian's analysis is reasonable. Si Qin is most likely trying to divert the trouble and stir up conflict. His ambitions aren't limited to Taitan." Li Chitian nodded. Thinking back on Si Qin's journey, it seemed that he had relied on his own schemes to reach his current position. He had used Inari as a springboard to climb to the top. Finally, he removed the springboard and sat on the highest seat. Perhaps Lu Heng and Qin Yining just happened to be there and took the blame. Even if they hadn't been caught, Si Qin might have found a way to frame Daiju and stir up conflict. He had used them to take the blame for him, and the bad things were done by others. Not only could he become the Khan, but he could also earn a good reputation as a man who cherished his wife. This man was truly brilliant. Li Chitian couldn't help but admire him. "Then, in your opinion, what should we do now?" Li Chitian looked at Qin Huayuan. Qin Huayuan lowered his eyes and thought for a moment, then said, "For the time being, regardless of who killed Inari Khan, Si Qin's dirty water has already been exposed to us. This old subject believes that now is the time to prepare the next step of our plan to deal with Si Qin. This old subject feels that Prince Zhengxian's analysis is reasonable. Si Qin might take this opportunity to invade the south. Daiju has two gods of war, so naturally we aren't afraid of Si Qin. However, this old subject knows that your Majesty is pitiful for the common people." Li Chitian immediately nodded. Qin Huayuan's suggestion was exactly what he was thinking. It wasn't just because he felt sorry for the common people. More importantly, they didn't have the money to fight. Daiju was now a shining city on the surface. In reality, it was very empty inside. If they wanted to fight a war, how could they not need money? But where would they find the money? If they could find the treasure, then they wouldn't have to worry about it. The problem was that no one knew where the treasure was at the moment. Li Chitian was thinking about the treasure and worried about the war. For a moment, he forgot about blaming Lu Heng and Qin Yining. He held a discussion with Qin Huayuan, Minister Lu, and Pang Xiao until late at night before letting them go back. After they left, he immediately ordered Li Guanwen, "Go and ask Prince Consort Ji to come to the palace." At the moment, Li Chitian trusted Ji Ziyu the most. Outside the palace gates, Minister Lu was directly carried into the carriage. Qin Huayuan and Pang Xiao politely sent off Minister Lu's carriage before returning to their own. Pang Xiao took the opportunity to whisper, "Father-in-law, We have to think of a way to save Sister Yi. I think Your Majesty wants to push all the blame to Sister Yi and Lu Heng once the assassination attempt starts. Chapter 507. Yes, Old Matriarch. Qin Huaining and Miss Ba both stood up, bowed, and then quietly retreated. When they reached the corridor, Qin Huaining pulled Miss Ba's hand and said in a low voice, "Does Mai know what Old Matriarch wants to talk about?" Miss Ba remembered that Old Matriarch had ordered her to serve Pang Xiao tea that day, and her face flushed red. Thinking of Pang Xiao's uninhibited but handsome face, her face burned even hotter. When Qin Huaining saw Miss Ba's appearance, she immediately had a guess in her heart. An indescribable jealousy and envy filled her bones. Originally, she was the most favored daughter in this family. After enjoying that kind of glory, splendor, wealth, and rank, she was now in the dust and could only watch others obtain happiness. She was the same age as Qin Yining. Qin Yining was able to marry such a heroic and brave man, but she didn't even see the shadow of a marriage. She also didn't see the elders in the family planning for her. How could she not hate and not be jealous? Qin Huaining took a deep breath and used a lot of strength to not let her face show any dissatisfaction and unwillingness. In the past, she had many confrontations with Qin Yining, so her good reputation had long been wiped clean in this family. Now, even if Qin Yining disappeared and wasn't in this family, most of the people in the family still spoke for Qin Yining. Especially the Sun clan. In the past, she didn't see her, as a mother, care much for her daughter. However, ever since Qin Yining disappeared, the Sun clan washed their faces with tears every day. They didn't eat or drink and had lost a lot of weight. They often choked with sobs and said they were sorry for their daughter. What Qin Huaining didn't like to see the Sun clan's tearful faces the most right now. That would remind her that her mother, who had once treasured her, had long abandoned her. She admitted that she had done something wrong. However, the Sun clan abandoned her just like that. They lived in the same residence all day long and acted as if they didn't see her. Wasn't this too heartless? When Miss 8 saw that Qin Huaining had ignored her for a long time, she couldn't help but feel strange. When she looked at Qin Huaining and saw the unconcealable viciousness in her eyes, Miss 8 was so frightened that her heart skipped a beat and her face immediately turned pale. Thinking of Qin Huaining's previous actions, Miss 8 subtly took 2 steps back and said, "I'm also tired. Sister Hui, you should also go and rest." Finished speaking, she curtsied, turned around, and left. Qin Huaining gritted his teeth. After a long while, he spat out, "What a despicable person." However, Qin Huaining told herself that she had already gotten used to it. She had seen a lot of things in the past. Now that she knew that after Qin Yining went missing, it was very likely that her family would send another daughter to the Prince Zhengxian's mansion. She had no choice but to make a plan for herself. Right now, she and Miss 8 were the only daughters of suitable age in the family. If she didn't grasp the opportunity to choose one out of the two, then the heavens would laugh at her for being weak. While Qin Huaining was pondering outside, old Madam had already pulled Qin Huayuan's hand and said earnestly, "Meng Jie, Mother knows that Sister Yi is missing. Your heart is distressed and anxious. You only have one daughter. With such a thing happening to her, how can the family not be anxious? However, you also have to consider our family Qin." When Qin Huayuan heard this, he looked at old Madam. After a long while, he asked, "Mother's meaning is?" Old Madam said, "Now that Sister Yi is missing, there's no woman in Prince Zhengxian's residence to serve him. I think that Prince Zhengxian loves our family's Sister Yi very much. Then, he won't dislike the girls in our family Qin. I was thinking that it would be better to send Miss 8 to be a concubine. Although Miss 8 is born of a concubine, she is beautiful and kind. Her temperament is fixed. Before Sister Yi got married, she was also the closest to Miss 8. In the future, if Sister Yi comes back, the two of them will be able to get along well. If Sister Yi really has an accident, then Miss 8 will be promoted from a concubine to a second wife. She will sit firmly in the position of Prince Zhengxian's concubine. It will also be a great help to our family Qin." Old Madam smiled and pulled Qin Huayuan's hand, This is our family Qin's matter. Meng Ji you can't refuse without any consideration just because you love Sister Yi. Although old madam was smiling and discussing with Qin Huayuan, it was clear that she had already made up her mind. Second Furen didn't speak. It was clear that she didn't want to wade in muddy water. After all, Miss 8 was the daughter of the third branch. Now, the third branch didn't have a mistress. Third master didn't say anything. Han's second young mistress also didn't say anything. It wasn't her turn to speak. However, Han's second young mistress smiled and said, I think old madam is right. My sister-in-law is a pure and good girl. Eldest uncle also knows. In the future, she will be a companion for Sister Yi. The two of them will get along well. When Qin Huayuan heard this, he lowered his eyes and didn't immediately answer. However, the Sun clan at the side couldn't bear it anymore and flipped the tea table. With a loud crash, the cups, plates, bowls, and plates all fell to the ground. The sound of porcelain shattering seemed to pierce through people's eardrums, startling the few people who were originally smiling and scheming. Old madam blankly stroked her chest. Second Furen and Han's second young mistress also took 2 steps back. The Sun clan's face was red with anger. Her chest was violently heaving. She pointed at old madam and Han's second young mistress. Her lips moved, but under her anger, she couldn't say a complete sentence. However, her eyes were bloodshot, and her appearance was too frightening. Even the sound of her breathing, which sounded like bellows, was eerie and frightening. Qin Huayuan stood up and supported the Sun clan. He gently comforted, all right, don't be angry. If you hurt your body, won't you be the one to suffer? You have to take good care of your body so that you can help Sister Yi in the future. Isn't that right? The Sun clan looked at Qin Huayuan. That anger that couldn't come up and go down finally dissipated. Tears also gushed out. Qin Huayuan hurriedly reached out and gently patted the Sun clan's back. Seeing that Qin Huayuan actually went to comfort that shrew, old madam's face sank. Brother Meng, you, mother. Qin Huayuan gently interrupted old madam's words. He said tiredly, in the future, please don't have any ideas about Sister Yi's family. Sister Hui and Bao Jiere's marriage will be over in the future. I will help arrange it. However, the current situation is tense. It's not the time to discuss their marriage. As for being a concubine and serving the same husband, mother, please don't mention it again. Sister Yi is alive and well now. Son-in-law only has her in his heart. As a grandmother, why do you have to do such a laborious and thankless thing? Old madam didn't expect that she would be reprimanded by her son. She was so angry that her eyes widened. She said incredulously, You say I'm laborious and thankless. You're disdaining me, this old woman. Mother. The current situation is really tense. I'm already mentally and physically exhausted outside. I don't have the energy to take care of the matters in the inner residence. Mother, please save some trouble and maintain the current situation in the inner residence for the time being. As for Sister Yi's marriage, no one should think of interfering. You can't get past me. After Qin Huayuan finished speaking, he supported the tearful Sun clan member and walked out. Old madam looked at the back view of Qin Huayuan and his wife as they walked out. She was so angry that her face turned red. She fiercely hammered the mattress. Really rebellious. After marrying a wife, he forgot his mother. This white-eyed wolf, ungrateful bastard. I loved him so much in vain. I loved him the most. Now, he actually refuted me for a wretched girl. As old madam spoke, she began to sob. She cried that the heavens were unfair. She cried that her husband died early. She cried that her son was unfilial. In any case, the whole world had let her down. Second Furen and Han's second young mistress were somewhat helpless. They couldn't watch old madam cry until her body was damaged. They could only persuade her. However, the more they persuaded, the louder her cries became. She often looked at the door through the gaps between her fingers, as if she was expecting Qin Huayuan to come back and apologize. Qin Huayuan listened to the sounds coming from old madam's room. He acted as if he didn't hear it. He supported Sun clan member and said, Mother's words, don't take it to heart. I can still handle Sister Yi's matter. If I say no, no one will bully our Sister Yi. Sun Clan member nodded and sobbed, I'm sorry for that child. I haven't had the time to treat her well. If something really happens to her, how can I live? That won't happen. You can be at ease. Sister Yi is a child with good fortune. Even if she encounters some setbacks, she will definitely be able to turn misfortune into blessing. Moreover, I just received news that Sister Yi is now in Tayton and is living well. You shouldn't let your imagination run wild. Really? Sun Clan member forgot to cry. She said in surprise, Laoi, is what you said true? You didn't deliberately say this to comfort this concubine? How could I deceive you? Qin Huayuan pulled Sun Clan member back to the room. He held her shoulder and said, although I can't be called a heroic figure, I still consider myself a gentleman. I won't deceive you. I know. I'm just too happy. Sister Yi is alive. Is she really alive? Yes, she is really alive. Although she encountered some trouble, you can rest assured that with me and son-in-law here, she will be fine. Qin Huayuan didn't explain the specific matter to Sun Clan. First, he was afraid that Sun Clan would be worried. Second, women were talkative. Some things needed to be kept secret and couldn't be casually spread outside. It was easy to get into trouble. Sun Clan members' tears turned into smiles and said, as long as she is alive, it's fine. As long as she is alive, there is hope. Our family hasn't done anything bad. The heavens won't be so cruel. Yes. So you shouldn't cry anymore. If you hurt your body and Sister Yi comes back and thinks that I mistreated you, I won't be able to explain myself. Hearing this, Sun Clan members' tears turned into smiles. She gently patted Qin Huayuan's shoulder and leaned into Qin Huayuan's embrace. Qin Huayuan hugged Sun Clan member. In a place where she couldn't see, he frowned with worry. After a night of rest, the Minuo tribe members finally recovered some of their energy. Last night, some of the leaders of the clan had already told these people what Qin Yining had said in a different way during their private chats. Early in the morning, Harbala and Chagan Bala gathered the tribe members and gave them a speech. At this time, Qin Yining's troop of nearly 1,000 people braved the bitter cold and hid behind a sand dune to rest. The gathering place was completely silent. No one had the extra energy to speak. At this time, they had to conserve their energy as much as possible. Saying anything unnecessary would be like wasting water and food. Qin Yining looked at Lu Heng lying beside her, wrapped in a cotton coat and shivering in the cold. His eyes were closed and his lips were pale. He could not help but frown with worry. They had been very cautious along the way, but their speed was even slower than before they entered the desert. Lu Heng had caught a cold and it was very aggressive. They could not treat him in time, and the Minuo tribe had rare medicinal herbs. It was difficult for Lu Heng's illness to not be delayed. Lu Heng had grown up in the Lu family and had been spoiled. He had never experienced such a drastic change, nor had he suffered such pain. This time, ever since they escaped from the capital, Lu Heng's taut string seemed to have suddenly snapped. She was unable to vent her anger. Coupled with the fact that they were homeless and miserable, living in difficult conditions, it was within her expectations that they would fall ill. However, everyone had expected Qin Yining to fall ill. Instead, the one who fell ill was Lu Heng, who looked much healthier. Everyone had guessed wrong. With Lu Heng's illness, Qin Yining, Harbala and Chagan Bala were in charge of taking care of him. Qin Yining was a careful person. She gave her horse to Lu Heng and led it with her. She took good care of Lu Heng. She only asked Harbala and Chagan Bala for help when there were things that were inconvenient for her to do. They had thought that Qin Yining was a delicate woman. It was already surprising that she could give up her horse. What they did not expect was that Qin Yining could still insist on walking with them in the desert. She had limited stamina, but she would never be a burden to others. She would not be willful. She would control herself and take a sip of water. She would never let others drink less water because of her. Beautiful women were admirable. In the Tayton, who were bold and unrestrained. Beautiful and strong women were even more fascinating. Her strength was surprising and admirable. Her intelligence and calmness were also admirable. Even though they knew that she was a married woman, many young men in the tribe still had a good impression of her. They were willing to give their dry food and water to her. It was just that she had never accepted it. Qin Yining could understand everyone's kindness, but she would not snatch other people's things. In the desert, water and food were the most important things to maintain life. If she ate and drank other people's food, it would increase the risk of death for others. She would never do such a thing. Lu Heng's illness worried Qin Yining very much. Chapter 509. Qin Yining used her own hand to lower Lu Heng's temperature. It was funny to say that it was a good thing that the night in the desert was bone-chilling. Otherwise, Qin Yining's body temperature would not be so low. But for the women of Daju and Dian, using their hands to touch a man's forehead was an extremely overbearing action. It was late at night. Many people were extremely tired. They snuggled together to warm each other and fell asleep. Qin Yining used one hand to touch Lu Heng's forehead. She curled up next to Lu Heng and unknowingly fell into a very light sleep. The wind in the desert rose and fell. It was so cold that it made people feel like they were being cut by knives. Qin Yining did not know about the other people's situation. In any case, she could not sleep well. In her dream, she vaguely saw a vast grassland. Pang Xiao was riding a shiny black warhorse on the grassland. His black and red cloak fluttered in the wind behind him. Behind him was bright sunlight. He was riding his horse towards her. He laughed loudly as he called out her name, Sister Yi. Qin Yining could not help but reveal a smile. She softly called out, Wang Yi. The scene changed. She seemed to be in an ancient temple on a large mountain surrounded by green trees. In front of her was a chaotic scene of killing. Blood splashed everywhere. Shouts of killing filled the sky. An archer climbed onto the roof of the opposite building and shot an arrow at her. But she could not hide because her mother and grandmother were behind her. At this moment, Pang Xiao suddenly appeared in front of her like a god. He tightly hugged her and used his body to block the arrow. Blood splashed on her face. She screamed in fear. Pang Xiao casually broke the arrow and rushed towards the enemy. She could see the half of the arrow in his shoulder move with his movements. Blood flowed out from the wound. Qin Yining anxiously shouted, Wang Yi, Wang Fei, wake up, wake up. Qin Yining felt someone gently push her and suddenly opened her eyes. What she saw was Lu Heng lying on his side facing her. The two of them were lying on the sand with a tattered cloth as their pillows. The stars in the sky were twinkling, reminding her of where she was right now. It was probably because she missed Pang Xiao that she dreamed of their past. They had been separated for too long this time and she was in a dangerous situation. The fear that she might not be able to see Pang Xiao alive would sweep over her in the dead of night when she was at her weakest. Qin Yining was not a stone. She could also feel fear and had emotions. It was only because of her childhood experience had taught her how to be strong. Most of the time, she was rational and knew what she could do and what she should do. For example, right now, she did not want to appear weak in front of outsiders. She also did not want people to pity her because of this. Qin Yining put away all of her melancholy and smiled politely at Lu Heng. She sat up to feel the temperature of Lu Heng's forehead. The fever has subsided a bit. Second Master Lu, how do you feel? Lu Heng looked at Qin Yining. He did not miss the weakness that she hid very well. She did not want to talk about it, so he did not ask. He smiled and said, It's nothing. How do you feel? I saw that you did not sleep well. Actually, he knew that Qin Yining had a nightmare. He heard her mumbling Wang Yi in her dream. No one could describe the bitterness in his heart. The pain of not being able to get what he wanted and not being able to ask for it had almost drowned him. During this period of time, they had been together day and night. The more he was with her, the more he saw her bravery and sensibility, which made him like her. He was even more impressed by her cleverness. It was not just him. Her perseverance was also influencing the tribesmen of the Minuo tribe. Everyone did not forget to grit their teeth and persevere for the sake of hope on their journey. When they first met, Lu Heng had a good impression of her because of her beauty. But after interacting with her for a long time, he was attracted to her personality and charm. In this desert, there was not enough water to drink, let alone wash up. But even though she looked like a little tabby cat, she still had a pair of bright and hopeful eyes. In this endless desert, there was starlight in her eyes. It made people feel that the future was full of hope. Lu Heng knew that he had really fallen for her. He also admitted that he had fallen for her. Actually, he had not fainted just now. He was just too uncomfortable and too tired. He did not even have the energy to say a word. That was why he closed his eyes and rested for a moment, trying to see if he could fall asleep. If he fell asleep, he would not feel so uncomfortable. But she put her hand on his forehead. Her hand was icy cold. It felt so comfortable when she put it on his head. That was probably the closest distance between them. Even though he knew that she was only doing it to save his life, his heart was still so happy that he wanted to sing. If this woman was willing to follow him, he was really willing to pile up everything he had in front of her, including his own life. He only wanted her to like him. Sometimes, Lu Heng really wished that he was a dirty person who could force himself on her. But his reason told him that the only way to get close to her in this life was to be her friend. Because she was a woman of principle and integrity. After she married, she would never be tempted by other men. She would also never give other men a reason to get close to her. Her way of doing things made Lu Heng admire her even more, but he also felt more helpless. Only when she was asleep did he dare to look at her so openly. Lu Heng thought a lot. In fact, it only took a breath. Qin Yining thought of the dream just now. She knew that she dreamed of when Pang Xiao had changed his name to young Master Yarrow to save her at the Immortal Lady Temple. Her longing was like a lingering thread that wrapped around her. It's nothing. I just had a nightmare. Qin Yining smiled bitterly and said, but it's all a dream. Fortunately, reality isn't as scary as dreams. Lu Heng smiled and didn't ask any more questions. Even though he was very envious of Pang Xiao for being able to win her heart. Are you feeling better? Drink some water. Qin Yining took out a water bag. He supported Lu Heng's head with one hand and fed him the water. Lu Heng only took a sip before he turned his head away and said, I'm not thirsty. I'm already feeling better. You should drink some water. You're sick. You need to drink more water. Drink a few more mouthfuls. Qin Yining fed him the water again. But Lu Heng turned his face away and refused to drink. I'm really not thirsty. You should drink some. I've already drunk enough water for today. Qin Yining pursed his lips and smiled. Because his lips were already dry and cracked, if he smiled too widely, his lips would split open. Lu Heng saw that his hair was full of sand, his face was haggard, and his lips were dry and cracked. His heart ached as he said, your lips are cracked. Don't people say that women are like flowers that need to be nourished by water? I'm really not thirsty. You should drink some water. Qin Yining helped Lu Heng up and forced him to drink 2 more mouthfuls of water. Then, he carefully sealed the water bag and hung it on Lu Heng's belt. He smiled and said, you should have heard that women are made of water. I'm water myself. Naturally, I don't need to drink so much water. Her lips were so dry that she didn't even dare to smile too widely. However, Lu Heng felt that her current appearance was extremely beautiful. His burning throat was moistened by the water, making him feel a little better. Lu Heng said, sleep a little more. We still need to hurry. You gave the horse to me. Walking by yourself will waste a lot of energy. If you don't sleep well, your body won't be able to take it. I know that you're not much stronger than me. Qin Yining smiled when he heard this. He lay down on the sand again and said, you should sleep too. Your body will only recover if you have a good rest. There are so many people in the group. Everyone can take care of each other. The situation is much better than when we first arrived. Don't worry. I won't leave you behind. We'll both be fine. The words won't leave you behind really hit the softest part of his heart. In such a harsh environment, Even if they were biological siblings, they might not be able to rely on them. However, Qin Yining was able to give him such a promise. Lu Heng's heart ached and softened. He felt happy and distressed at the same time. He made a sound of acknowledgement and forced himself to close his eyes and sleep. Because if they continued talking, Lu Heng was afraid that he would reveal the feelings he hid in the depths of his heart. He was afraid that he would startle her and make her stay far away from him. He imagined that he was lying on the bed at home, and Qin Yining was so close to him. She must be lying on the same bed as him. The quilt was shining softly under the orange candlelight. Her long hair was scattered on the pillow, and she was smiling at him with her eyes and eyebrows. As he thought of this, Lu Heng couldn't help but smile. Even if it was just a daydream, being able to worry about someone like this in his heart was also blissful. Not long after, Lu Heng felt a small, ice-cold hand land on his forehead. It covered his forehead and cooled him down. The disappointment and unwillingness in Lu Heng's heart turned into nothingness at this moment. In this life, he was fated to meet her, to be her friend, to be able to share trials and tribulations with her, to be able to spend time with her day and night. He even let her use her ice-cold hand to cool him down without considering the distance between men and women. Having this much was more than enough for him. When the sky gradually brightened, everyone started their journey again. Although it was very difficult in the desert. This time, because they brought with them tribesmen who were good at finding water in the desert, they would occasionally come across oases where they could drink their fill their water bags, and luxuriously scrub them. They recorded the changes of the sun and the moon, and they were also constantly avoiding their pursuers. After walking like this for half a month, they finally realized that they could see the end of the endless yellow sand in the distance. Withered yellow grass and piles of white snow. They finally walked out of the desert. We did it. We did it. The tribesmen hugged and cheered. Some of them were so excited that they cried. 2 streaks of tears ran down their dirty faces. Qin Yining was also smiling. She glanced at Lu Heng, who was lying unconscious on the horse's back. Although she was worried, she could finally breathe a sigh of relief. As long as they left the desert, Lu Heng would have hope of surviving. Uncle Ahan, pay attention to the surrounding environment. Tell the tribesmen not to neglect the environment because they are too happy. We met very few pursuers along the way. I think it's very likely that Khan arranged for people to stand guard outside the desert, waiting for us to run into them. Chapter 510. The laughing crowd finally saw hope. Harbala and Chaganbara were like 2 wild horses that had finally taken off their bridles and saddles. They didn't know where they got the strength from, but they were still able to run happily on the ground. Uncle Ahan, who had always been calm, also hugged his clansmen and laughed heartily. He used his left arm to pat his clansmen's shoulders and backs. Hearing Qin Yining's words, Uncle Ahan stopped and said seriously, "Yes, what you said makes sense. I'll make everyone pay attention. Let's arrange a scout to explore the way first. Fortunately, you're calm. We're all too happy. We don't have the mind to pay attention to these things." Qin Yining smiled and said, "This is human nature. I'm as happy as everyone. But the more it's like this, the more we can't relax. We can't let our efforts go to waste." "You're right." Uncle Ahan and his clansmen had been observing Qin Yining's actions along the way. They had long been convinced by Qin Yining's suggestions. Ahan turned his head and said to his clansmen, "The pursuit we encountered along the way was not intense. It can be seen that Yutjin Khan did not arrange a lot of people in the desert. He is a sanctimonious person, so he will definitely avenge that she-devil Anari with great fanfare. Since the pursuers in the desert are limited, he must have arranged people outside the desert." His clansmen nodded. Some of them were also a little flustered. What if he really arranged people? It's not difficult. We'll choose 2 warriors who are fast to be scouts. They'll explore the way first, and our team will slowly move forward. We'll first leave the desert to find water. When we hear the news, we'll decide what to do next. Okay, we'll listen to Uncle. His clansmen all agreed. Ahan explained to Qin Yining again. Cheen Ening nodded with a smile and said, "You fought in wars and have experience. I don't know these things, so I'll listen to Uncle's arrangements." Uncle Ahan was happy to hear this. He then chose 2 scouts to go to the charcoal stove. Their team was quickly organized. The 1,000 people didn't stretch out the team. Instead, they gathered together in a diamond-shaped square formation to deal with all kinds of sudden dangers. The team moved forward slowly and cautiously. Because of Ahan's words just now, all the clansmen in the team became very cautious. Everyone kept their eyes and ears open, as if a wild beast would suddenly jump out from a corner and bite them. After traveling for an hour, the sky started to darken. After a period of time, the tense crowd began to relax a little. Even Cheen Ening began to wonder if he had been worrying too much. Just as she was wondering if she should ask everyone to stop and take a break, someone on the left wing of the team suddenly shouted. His voice was hoarse, like a blunt knife scratching a rough stone floor. "There are pursuers. It's the pursuers." Not far away, a group of about 100 cavalrymen were galloping towards them. They were all waving broadswords in their hands. Their loud laughter and shouts intimidated the group of refugees who had just walked to the edge of the desert. Someone panicked. Ahan shouted loudly in Tatan, "Stay calm and cut the horse's legs. Let them know that there are no cowards in our Minuo tribe." Along the way, they had thought of many countermeasures to deal with unexpected situations. Some of them were veterans, but they also took the time to teach the people around them how to deal with the enemy. Although they saw so many people rushing towards them with broadswords, after Ahan's reminder, the people who had been baptized by the desert forced themselves to calm down. They didn't show any signs of panic. Instead, they changed their formation and faced the enemy head-on. Cheen Ening stood guard beside Lu Heng's horse. He also had a broadsword in his hand. He pursed his lips and stared at the enemy's movements with sharp eyes. It was as if he could rush to the front at any time. Ahan couldn't help but nod. Originally, there were about 150 cavalrymen stationed in this central area. Although Yutkin had arranged this place, he didn't arrange too many people. According to the calculations of the Khan and his strategists, this was the furthest place from the border of Daju after leaving the desert. Unless this group of people had lost their minds in the desert, there was no way they would take a detour to this place. This place was too remote and the least likely place for people to come. They also didn't have as many people as other strongholds. However, they didn't expect this group of people who were not afraid of death to actually come to this most unlikely place. The way the pursuers looked at the Minuo tribe was as if they were looking at shining silver, lively livestock, and countless beautiful women. Because the Khan had said that as long as anyone could capture the 2 murderers of the great Ju dynasty who killed Anari Khan, they would definitely be promoted to nobility, enjoy glory, splendor, and wealth, and would be rewarded with 1,000 taels of silver and 100 beauties. These people were so excited, and the Minuo tribesmen in front of them were in such a sorry state that they didn't take them seriously at all. So, in the end, they still suffered because they underestimated the enemy. The sounds of fighting and roars came from the grassland. A strong wind blew, bringing with it the strong smell of blood. In the chaotic battle, the Minuo tribe won a Pyrrhic victory. Although they had wiped out more than 100 enemies and seized a lot of horses, weapons, rations, and water, nearly 200 tribesmen had to stay here forever. Uncle Ahan sobbed. If it weren't for the fatigue, thirst, and hunger in the desert, and the lack of weapons and equipment, we wouldn't have sacrificed so many tribesmen. Everyone was very sad. Cheen Ening looked at his tribesmen who were cleaning up the battlefield and couldn't help but lower his head and wipe his tears. The only thing they could be thankful for was that they now had more war horses and weapons, as well as more water and rations. They had also successfully left the desert. They pulled themselves together and counted the number of tribesmen again outside the desert. Cheen Ening took a sip of water to moisten his dry throat, then said to Ahan, "Uncle Ahan, I think there must be a camp of that group of people nearby. We should take a short rest first, then think of a way to raid that camp after we recover our strength. I think there must be some people guarding there. But we attacked when they were unprepared, and everyone has recovered from their fatigue, so we have a good chance of winning." As long as we win, we will have enough rations and supplies. Ahan nodded repeatedly and said, "We are thinking the same thing. I am also thinking the same thing. We left the desert in order to make a living for our clansmen. Don't tell me we don't want the supplies. Brothers, don't you think so? Yes. We don't have to feel guilty about robbing Dog Khan. Rob him. Rob him." The warriors who had just lost their tribesmen were filled with hatred. Thinking of the people who had died tragically in their families, they were willing to do anything to cause trouble for the imperial family. Good. Then let's discuss how to deal with him. Uncle Ahan was very charismatic. He quickly blended into the crowd and called the leaders of each group to come forward and discuss. In the end, the result of the discussion was that the weaker and the healthy women who came with them would stay behind, while Ahan and Chagan Bala would take 300 men and attack the camp. After the two scouts came back and told everyone the direction of the camp, Ahan and Chagan Bala took 300 men and set off. Harbala took the other tribesmen, Chin Ening and Lu Hung, and stayed behind. Chin Ening was a little worried. But when it came to fighting, she was a layman after all. She still had to trust Uncle Ahan's experience. Chin Ening and the two young women put Lu Hung down from the horse. They melted the snow in a jar, boiled it, and fed it to him when it was cold. Lu Hung was often unconscious these days, and his body was very weak. At this time, Chin Ening tried to feed him water, but for a long time, water would overflow from his tightly closed lips. Chin Ening wiped the water from his chin with a handkerchief again, frowning with worry. If Lu Hung's condition didn't improve, he might really be in danger. They had to settle down quickly and find a way to find medicine for him. Chin Ening found a clean handkerchief, dipped it in water, and helped Lu Hung wipe his face. He was not in good health these days. His cheeks were thin and sunken, and the stubble on his chin was very prickly. Chin Ening carefully wiped his face, washed the handkerchief, and wiped his hands. Perhaps it was because the touch of the wiping was too cold, Lu Hung finally regained some consciousness from her deep sleep. "You're awake," Chin Ening said happily. "How are you feeling? Drink some water. We're out of the desert." Chin Ening's voice was full of joy. Lu Hung looked at her and couldn't help but laugh. His voice was hoarse, as if it had been rubbed by sandpaper. "I know. I feel my face is clean. If they didn't get out of the desert, where would they find extra water to wipe him?" Chin Ening laughed and brought him some warm water. "We're not short of water now. Drink more water. This water is cold boiled water. It's clean. You have to drink more water to recover faster." Chin Ening helped Lu Hung up and fed him some water. Then, he soaked the captured rice cakes in hot water and fed them to him. Lu Hung forced himself to stay awake. While eating, he asked about the current situation in the tribe. Chin Ening told Lu Hung about Uncle Ahan and Chagan Bala leading people to attack the enemy camp. Lu Hung smiled and nodded. "I'm not worried about you. Is that why you're sleeping without worry?" Chin Ening joked with a smile. Lu Hung couldn't help laughing when he heard this. After drinking enough water and eating hot food, Lu Hung felt much better. Although he was drowsy, he didn't fall asleep immediately. Instead, he wrapped himself in a thick cotton-padded coat and listened to Chin Ening talk about the past few days. He didn't fall asleep until he couldn't take it anymore. When the sun rose in the east, Uncle Ahan came back with good things. They successfully raided the camp and seized a lot of food and horses. When everyone heard the news, they cheered and rushed to the camp. Chapter 5:11. Chin Ening's tense mood could finally relax. After following the clansmen to the camp, she found that the camp had already been cleaned up by Uncle Ahan. The most important thing was that there was a winding river not far from the camp. Although the weather was cold and the river was frozen, the people who came from the desert didn't care about that. They didn't care that this was a battlefield just now. They cheered and went to cut the ice to get water. Some people even cut a large piece of ice and put it in a small iron pot that they carried with them to heat it. Soon, simple tents of different sizes were set up around the camp. Chin Ening was also given a tent. She left Lu Heng in the care of Harbala and Chaganbara and went to cut the ice herself. She borrowed an iron pot from the camp to boil water and wash herself. Because she was the hero who killed a Nari and played a commanding role in the desert these days, the clansmen respected her very much. So when they saw that she wanted to boil water, they helped her regardless of their exhaustion. They even moved the firewood from the camp for her to use. After walking in the desert for half a month, Qin Yining finally took a hot bath and washed her dirty clothes. After everything was done, Qin Yining's hair was half dry. She carefully dried her hair with a handkerchief and tied it into a simple bun. She put on her hat and went out of her tent. She came to Lu Heng's tent and asked softly, "Is Second Master Lu resting?" The tent's curtain was quickly lifted and a gust of warm and humid air rushed out. Harbala poked his head out and nodded at Qin Yining with a smile. He said in broken Da-Ju dialect, "You're here." Qin Yining smiled and nodded. Seeing that Harbala moved aside, Qin Yining ducked into the tent. There was still a wooden basin in the tent. The water from the scrubbing had not been poured out yet. The three men were already dressed neatly. Lu Heng had changed into a clean set of clothes. His eyes were slightly downcast as he leaned against the bed made of hay and wooden planks. His wet hair hung over his shoulders, dripping with water. Qin Yining frowned and hurriedly grabbed a handkerchief to help him up. "You haven't recovered yet. How can you be so careless? If you lie down with wet hair, aren't you afraid that your illness will worsen?" She hesitated for a moment, but still began to help him dry his hair. Lu Heng's heart pounded. In fact, he had just washed himself and was too weak to do anything. After putting on his clothes, he didn't even have the strength to lift his arms. That was why he wanted to rest for a while before drying his hair. Who would have thought that Qin Yining would be willing to do it for him? "Thank you very much." Lu Heng's voice was hoarse, and he couldn't say anything else. His voice was also very weak. "You're welcome. It wasn't easy for us to walk out of the desert and the situation seems to be getting better." Nearly 200 tribesmen had died. Moreover, a few tribesmen had lost their lives when they took over this camp. A few others had been seriously injured. It was likely that they couldn't be saved. Lu Heng's heart wasn't completely calm. But he also understood that the Minuo tribesmen who had just crossed the desert and were thirsty and hungry were able to defeat the guards arranged by Sai Qin. This was already a very impressive victory. After all, these people were all cavalrymen who had received professional training. The Minuo tribesmen weren't professional soldiers. They were just ordinary herdsmen in the past. There were even dozens of women among them. The Minuo tribe was truly an outstanding and powerful tribe. It was no wonder that they had been able to develop and grow into a large tribe of more than 40,000 people. The reason why Anari had persecuted the Minuo tribe was probably because the Minuo tribe was too powerful. She had already felt threatened. Lu Heng really wanted to comfort Qin Yining, but he was really too tired at the moment. His eyelids were so heavy that they seemed to be filled with lead. Even his usually nimble mind had become sluggish. The corners of his mouth twitched. With great difficulty, he said, "It's not your fault." In the blink of an eye, he had already fallen asleep. When Qin Yining saw that he had fallen asleep, he used his hand to check the temperature of his forehead. Seeing that he still had a slight fever, he couldn't help but worry. He stayed by Lu Heng's side until midnight before returning to his tent to rest. The next day, Uncle Ahan brought the captains of the various teams to the central tent. With Qin Yining, Chaganbala, Harbala, and Lu Heng, who was dressed like a ball, they discussed a strategy. Lu Heng woke up early and ate a bowl of soft and sticky porridge. He also ate the last of his medicine. After that, he felt much better. When Qin Yining saw that he had indeed come, he smiled and said, "You really are a trustworthy friend. You really didn't fall asleep when you promised me that you wouldn't." Lu Heng smiled and said, "I slept enough last night." Uncle Ahan smiled and patted Lu Heng's shoulder. "In Tayton," he said, "Brother Lu, it seems that your body is really much better. Wang Fei's care for you along the way was not in vain. If something were to happen to you, I think the princess consort would be seriously ill." Uncle Ahan was a boorish man. He didn't realize that there was anything wrong with his words. He was just speaking the truth. However, there were many young people present who admired Qin Yining. There were also many who could see that Lu Heng liked Qin Yining. They couldn't help but look at the two of them. Lu Heng's heart was thumping like a rabbit. His face was a little red. "Uncle Ahan, don't talk nonsense." Ahan looked at Qin Yining. He thought about her identity and then looked at Lu Heng's red face. He couldn't help but sigh. He patted his shoulder again. Everything was understood without words. Qin Yining didn't understand what they were saying. She had learned some Taitan during this period of time. However, she could only understand simple words. If the words were connected and they spoke too fast, she still couldn't understand what they were saying. Qin Yining saw that Lu Heng's face was red. She asked worriedly, "Are you not feeling well?" She habitually tested the temperature of his forehead. Lu Heng smiled and said, "I'm fine." His heart was bitter and sweet at the same time. It was contradictory. He turned to the crowd and said in Taitan, "This time, everyone was able to protect our tribesmen and walk out of the desert. Everyone is a hero. I have long known that the Taitan are a strong and unyielding people. Now it seems that the rumors are true. It is admirable. The people of the Minuo tribe are the best among the Taitan people. I am really touched and shocked to have followed everyone on this journey." Uncle Ahan was overwhelmed with emotions. The rest of the people also had happy and proud expressions on their faces. They were all hot-blooded men with tenacious and unyielding hearts. They were able to persevere through all kinds of hardships and receive praise from outsiders. They didn't know that their surging emotions were actually a sense of national honor. Qin Yining didn't know what Lu Heng said. However, from everyone's expressions, she knew that Lu Heng's words had touched everyone's hearts. She couldn't help but admire Lu Heng's ability in her heart. He was really a very talented leader. He had the ability to make people accept him wholeheartedly. It was no wonder that he could leave the protection of his family at a young age and start from scratch. He only told everyone that he was a member of the Lu family when he had developed to a height that no one could reach. Chapter 5:12. Everyone who was still immersed in the joy of escaping from the desert and capturing the camp was woken up by Lu Heng's words. They calmed down and began to think about their current situation. The troops guarding the desert were definitely Sai Qin's men. The reason why they left the desert and happened to meet this small group was because Qin Yining had been advocating for them to go in this direction when they were in the desert. Some of them had already lost track of the direction and just went with the flow. There were also those who knew the direction and felt that they were getting further and further away from the Daju border. They thought that Qin Yining's command was wrong. But now that they thought about it, Qin Yining must have expected Sai Qin's men to be waiting outside. With their current strength, if they met a large group of pursuers, they wouldn't have a chance of winning, let alone when they had just left the desert and were exhausted. It could be said that Qin Yining's choice of direction was equivalent to saving everyone's lives. Otherwise, they would have sacrificed more than just the 200 tribesmen. After realizing the severity of the current situation, everyone finally recovered from their elated state and their feet finally landed on the ground. Second Master Lu's words make sense. "Uncle Ahan, what do you think we should do?" Chagan Bala asked with a frown. Ahan thought for a moment and said, "The best thing we can do now is to send people to scout the way and find out the situation outside. We can also confirm the location of the other camps so that we can hide." But Halba said, "We're not afraid of them. If we really meet the Khan's army, none of the Minuo warriors will retreat without a fight." Lu Heng smiled and nodded when she heard this. She slowly said, "You're right. The Minuo warriors are not afraid of those things. But in my humble opinion, unnecessary conflict is not good for us. Unless we meet a battle that we must fight, such as food and other things that are beneficial to our tribesmen." Chagan Bala laughed. "Yes, our tribesmen are fighting with their lives. If we don't seek anything and just fight, wouldn't that be too reckless?" Hearing this, everyone in the room laughed. Although Qin Yining didn't understand what they were talking about, He was relieved to see the atmosphere lighten up. In the end, Lu Heng and the others came to an agreement. They would first arrange for the scouts to scout the surrounding area, while the tribesmen in the camp would tidy up and prepare to set off at any time. After the news was passed down, the clansmen did not have the slightest objection and immediately got busy. Compared to the harsh conditions of the desert, even if the weather was cold now and there was heavy snow from time to time, everyone was filled with hope for the future. After Sai Qin ascended to the position of Khan, it took him some time to finally stabilize the situation in the Taytan imperial court. Everyone raised the issue of enriching the harem. One of the courtiers suggested that a beauty pageant be held for Sai Qin immediately. All the Taytan tribes had to send over their beauties. When Anari became the regent, most of the Taytan's royal family had already died. Originally, everyone thought that Anari's heir would be the crown prince. Now that Anari had been assassinated, Sai Qin did not have a single woman by his side. If Sai Qin were to have an heir, wouldn't the Taytan royal family be without a successor? For the sake of the stability of the country, the courtiers could be said to have exhausted their mouths and used various methods to persuade Sai Qin to establish a cartoon and take in more beauties. However, Sai Qin solemnly said during the court meeting, "Ben Khan's only true love is Anari. If there is to be a cartoon, I only hope that it will be Anari. I will have an heir, but other than Anari, no other woman has the qualifications to sit on the cartoon throne. Ben Khan will have 6 people and produce heirs for the sake of the Taytan dynasty's continuity and stability. As for the cartoon matter, everyone should stop trying to persuade me." When an old courtier heard this, he was so moved that tears streamed down his face. He placed his hand on his chest and bowed deeply. "The Khan's deep love and righteousness, I believe that Anari's spirit in heaven will also be moved." All the courtiers bowed and shouted, "The Khan's deep love and righteousness. This is our Taytan's fortune." Regardless of whether Yutjin Khan wanted to establish a cartoon or not, as long as he did not become a monk, he could have many beauties and many heirs, and there would be no need to worry about the succession of the dynasty. The courtiers were all shrewd people, and would not disagree with Sai Qin on this matter. Seeing that the courtiers were all in agreement, Sai Qin solemnly brought up the matter of Anari again. Ben Khan's heart is only aching for Anari's suffering. Unfortunately, the assassins are too cunning. Ben Khan arranged for so many people, yet they were unable to catch the 2 assassins. Even if they were protected by the traitors of the Minuo tribe, they should have at least received some news. Sai Qin's voice was loud and clear, but his tone was calm, and did not carry any unnecessary emotions. But the courtiers bowed deeply again. "We are useless. Quickly rise. Ben Khan has no intention of blaming you." Sai Qin stood up and clasped his hands behind his back. No matter how valiant a warrior is, he may not be able to defeat the cunning Jew people. A courtier who understood Sai Qin's thinking stood up and said, "Khan, those 2 assassins must have been sent by the dog emperor of Daju. The only reason they were able to escape is because the emperor of Daju helped them from behind." "That's right, Khan." Another courtier of Sai Qin also stood up and bowed. "The emperor of Daju has gone too far. Not only did he send assassins to assassinate Anari Khan, he even sent a letter of credence condemning their actions. Yet, the emperor of Daju still dared to quibble. He did not apologize, nor did he compensate. He really does not respect us Taytan." These words immediately caused discussion and speculation among the courtiers. Soon, everyone was certain that the emperor of Daju had ordered the assassins to assassinate Anari Khan. After the assassination, he did not admit to it and instead tried to help the assassins escape punishment. The discussion among the courtiers became louder and louder, and their emotions became more and more intense. Amidst the clamor, a loud voice said, "Those cunning foxes of Daju need to be taught a lesson by us Taytan hunters. We need to let them know how powerful we are." When the courtiers heard this, their fighting spirit was ignited, and their bloodlust was aroused. Not a single Taytan warrior would admit that they were cowards who did not dare to take revenge for Anari Khan. Moreover, Yutjin Khan was very fond of Anari Khan. Everyone wanted to take revenge for Anari Khan, and at the same time, make Yutjin Khan happy and curry favor with him. Everyone thought of this at the same time and became excited. For a moment, the court was filled with people volunteering themselves. The corners of Sichin's mouth couldn't help but curl up into a faint smile, but it was quickly suppressed by restraint. Sichin said, "Thank you all, but we Taytan people are not unreasonable. Ben Khan has decided to first negotiate with Daeju and give them a chance. If they still refuse to admit their mistakes, then they can't blame us for taking revenge." When the courtiers heard this, they all agreed and bowed. After the court meeting, someone immediately drafted a declaration of war. Not only did it detail the shameless actions of the people of Daeju who sent people to assassinate Anari Khan but refused to admit their mistakes, it also implicitly praised Yutjin Khan's wise and benevolent governance after he ascended the throne. This declaration of war was not only sent to Daeju, but was also posted in all the major cities and towns in Taytan territory. For a moment, it caused a heated discussion among the people, and voices of praise for Yutjin Khan's wisdom could be heard everywhere. On the other hand, the people of Daeju were disgusted by the shameless words in the declaration of war. Li Chitian was so angry that he smashed his favorite tea set, and immediately called Pang Xiao, Minister Lu, and Qin Huayuan into the palace to reprimand them. "Tell me, what should we do now?" Not only did the people of Taytan issue a declaration of war, they were also disrespectful to me. Not only that, they even asked for compensation. The people of Taytan are so poor that they've gone crazy. Li Chitian was in a terrible fix. Speaking of which, he was the emperor who was about to take over the world, so he wasn't afraid of war at all. However, the biggest problem wasn't that he didn't have soldiers, but that Daeju's treasury really couldn't squeeze out any more money to start a war. He was already struggling to make ends meet, and now the people of Taytan wanted to extort money from him. How could Li Chitian not be angry? "Your Majesty, please calm down." Qin Huayuan was the calmest of the three. When he saw that Pang Xiao and Minister Lu didn't say anything, he naturally bowed and said, "In my opinion, Sichin is trying to extort us. If they don't succeed, then they will find an excuse to start a war." When he heard the word war, Li Chitian felt a headache coming on. War and the people's livelihood, which of these didn't require money? However, the dilapidated imperial court was still as chaotic as before. It wasn't because Daeju had established a dynasty that the old diseases left behind by Biji's tyranny no longer existed. They had been working hard to stabilize the country and wanted Daeju to gradually grow stronger as soon as possible. However, in these troubled times, the imperial court didn't have the spare energy to take care of other things. Li Chitian was so worried that his hair had turned white. "I also know that this is the situation. The problem is, how can we resolve this situation? I've said it before. After so many years of war, the people have no way of making a living. If I can prevent the ordinary people from suffering, I will do whatever I can. This time, we don't know whether our people were the ones who assassinated Anari, but the problem is that the people of the Qin clan and Lu Heng were captured, and they're accusing us. Now, the Taytan are demanding an exorbitant price. Either give us money, or start a war. I pity the people of the world." Li Chitian was so distressed that he almost wanted to beat his chest and stamp his feet. Being the emperor seemed to be glorious, but now he was mentally and physically exhausted. He no longer felt like he was about to be mentally and physically exhausted. Minister Lu and Pang Xiao didn't say a word. In any case, they knew that Li Chitian didn't care about the safety of Lu Heng and Qin Yining. If the Taytans said that they wouldn't pursue the matter as long as they handed over the two people, Li Chitian would gladly agree, regardless of whether they were playing a trick or not. Chapter 513. Li Chitian and Qin Huayuan discussed countermeasures, but in the end, they could not come to a conclusion. In the end, they could only write in the letter of credence. They could not show that they were afraid of the Taytan and lose the prestige of their country. At the same time, they had to distance themselves from the Nari incident. When the letter of credence was sent to the Taytan, it naturally angered the Taytan officials. Everyone asked to go to war, and Sichin finally got what he wanted. He began to order his men to prepare for war. In less than 10 days, the supplies were ready. Sai Qin did not announce it with great fanfare. Instead, he arranged for a small team of 100 people to disguise themselves as merchants and transport large amounts of supplies to the front line. Jing Huwei, who was sent by Pang Xiao to look for Qin Yining, received news that the Taitan had secretly sent supplies before he could find Qin Yining's whereabouts. After Pang Xiao received the news, he went to see Qin Huayuan with a serious expression. "Father-in-law, my men received the news, but I am not sure if your majesty knows about it as well." Qin Huayuan frowned and thought for a moment before he said, "Are you not sure if you should tell your majesty about this?" Li Chitian kept a close eye on Pang Xiao's men. If he told Li Chitian about this, wouldn't it be the same as telling Li Chitian that he had sent people to the Taitan? However, if he did not tell Li Chitian, as a citizen of Daju, if he did not tell him about the Taitan's abnormality, he would lose the initiative due to insufficient preparations. In that case, he would lose the lives of his soldiers. Pang Xiao thought for a moment before he said, "It's not a big deal to tell your majesty about this. Your majesty has always known about my bad temper. Even if he isn't monitoring my movements right now, I'm afraid that he has already expected me to send someone to look for Sister Yi." Qin Huayuan smiled and said, "So you plan to tell your majesty directly?" "Father-in-law, what do you think? I don't want the people and soldiers at the border to lose their lives for no reason." When Qin Huayuan heard this, he patted Pang Xiao's shoulder. "You can see through it. Actually, none of this mattered. If we have too many misgivings during the ups and downs of the officialdom, we will easily lose our original intentions. Back then, when you rebelled against the tyranny of Northern Ji, you didn't do it for yourself, did you?" Pang Xiao was moved. He smiled and said, "Father-in-law is right. Father-in-law sees things clearly." Qin Huayuan smiled and said, "You have already done a good enough job. Your Majesty is most concerned about the money right now. What he cares about the most is that he doesn't have enough money when the war starts, not whether or not the war will start. Therefore, by telling your Majesty this news, we have done our duty as officials." How could Pang Xiao not understand the ridicule in Qin Huayuan's words? He was mocking Li Chitian's high-sounding words. What he said about feeling sorry for the people was nonsense. What he was really worried about was money. Pang Xiao decided not to worry so much, and his mood suddenly brightened. "Father-in-law is right. I also don't want to be overcautious anymore. Once the war starts, I believe that your Majesty will definitely send me to battle. Your Majesty will probably put me in an important position and won't be too harsh on me for sending people to Taitan." "Oh," Qin Huayuan said with interest, "how can you be so sure that your Majesty will definitely send you to battle?" Pang Xiao smiled and said, "That's because His Majesty trusts Alan very much. Alan is now in charge of the brave Tiger Army, which is surrounding and protecting the capital. His Majesty won't feel at ease leaving the safety of his people in the hands of anyone else." Li Chitian already didn't trust Pang Xiao. After Pang Xiao went against more than 30 imperial edicts for Qin Yining, that kind of distrust had reached its peak. If Li Chitian knew what was good for him, how could he let someone he suspected protect his safety? Qin Huayuan said, "Don't think too much. Your Majesty definitely won't take the initiative to start a war, but Yujin Khan is very likely to do so. During this period of time, you should think about how you and the Dragon Stallion army will work together. Also, in terms of tactics, Sai Qin is an extremely cunning person. It won't be easy to gain any benefits from him. Father-in-law is right. I will think about it. Then, I will let your Majesty know the news first." Pang Xiao respectfully confirmed again. Qin Huayuan said, "Don't be too nervous. Trust your own judgment." Pang Xiao already knew about Qin Huayuan's godlike foresight. Qin Huayuan nodded. He also felt more confident in his heart. After informing Li Chitian that the Taitan had begun to gather and transfer supplies at the border, Li Chitian looked at him with a complicated expression for a long time before waving his hand to dismiss him. At this time, Qin Yining's 800-man army was cautiously bypassing the 2 Taitan sentry posts and finally approaching the border of Daju. Everyone was elated. However, just as everyone was rejoicing and thinking that they were one step closer to success, a scout suddenly came to report in a hurry. We found a group of 100 people ahead. They are escorting many carriages. Arjan asked, "Who are those people?" "They look like merchants, but looking at their figures and habits, they don't look like merchants. Instead, they look like a group of soldiers." As soon as this was said, everyone became nervous. If they were really soldiers, it meant that Sai Qin was very likely to use his weapons. When Qin Yining heard Lu Heng's explanation, he couldn't help but turn pale with fright. This is no small matter. Qin Yining frowned and said, "When Sai Qin did that, I already suspected his ambition. I didn't expect that I guessed right. His actions seemed to be moving in that direction step by step." Qin Yining didn't say anything about Sai Qin killing a Nari. Others might not understand, but Lu Heng understood. Before the troops and horses move, the supplies will move first. If Yujin Khan really transferred the supplies, I'm afraid that the Tatan and Daeju are going to go to war. While the two of them were discussing in low voices, the rest of the Minuo tribe cheered. There are so many supplies, who cares what Yujin Khan wants to do? We don't have enough food to eat, clothes to wear, and tents to use. Let's rob him first. Rob him. Rob him. The tribesmen were all excited. Lu Heng understood and couldn't help but find it funny. He covered his mouth and coughed twice, then turned to Qin Yining and said, "It seems that we were thinking too much. What's wrong?" Qin Yining could also see that the tribesmen were in high spirits, but he didn't understand what they were talking about. Lu Heng said, "The truth is often the simplest and most straightforward. Just like what the tribesman said, no matter what Sai Qin wants to do, we lack food and clothes. Let's just rob him first and talk later. After all, there are so many tribesmen waiting for us to feed in the future." When Uncle Arjan heard Lu Heng and Qin Yining's words, he couldn't help but laugh loudly. He turned around and told the news to all the tribesmen. Chaganbala and Harbala were extremely excited and volunteered to rob this batch of supplies. Chapter 514. However, Lu Heng said, "Daeju has just ended the war and has no intention of invading the north. Wu Tejin Khan is doing this because he wants to take the opportunity to expand his territory. When I was with him earlier, he had already revealed this intention." Qin Yining nodded in agreement. Wu Tejin Khan is indeed very ambitious. Now that the situation was clear, it was obvious why Sai Qin had killed Anari. She and Lu Heng were just taking the blame for Sai Qin. Therefore, since Sai Qin had only mobilized the provisions in preparation for war, they had to intercept the provisions. Firstly, Minuo was already short on provisions. Secondly, they had brought so many people with them. Were they just sightseeing? How could they let go of the opportunity to stab Wu Tejin Khan in the back? Thirdly, Qin Yining felt that this was the most important point. According to her observation, the Tatan were not very rich. They were a nomadic people, and their provisions were not as abundant as the Dayan. Intercepting their provisions was likely to delay the war and reduce some of the pressure on Pang Xiao. Qin Yining did not need to be in the capital. As long as she calmed down and analyzed the situation, she knew that once the war started, regardless of whether it was in the north or the south, Li Qitian would definitely send Pang Xiao to battle. This was because Li Qitian did not trust Pang Xiao and would definitely not leave the safety of the capital to him. Moreover, if Li Qitian wanted to murder Pang Xiao would be outside, and Li Qitian would be able to shirk responsibility. Thinking about it this way, Pang Xiao was surrounded by danger. Qin Yining wished that she could immediately grow a pair of wings and fly back to the capital. It was a pity that she could only try her best to advance towards the border. While everyone was discussing in full swing, Qin Yining seemed to be a little absent-minded. When Lu Heng saw her frown, he could already guess what she was thinking, and his heart felt a little sour. Even if Pang Xiao didn't protect her well, even if he was the one who went through hardships with her, Qin Yining would always only have Pang Xiao in his heart. He couldn't see anyone else. Lu Heng envied Pang Xiao's good luck to have such an outstanding woman treat him wholeheartedly. He also sighed at his own infatuation. He was afraid that he would never be able to get a return in this lifetime. Everyone discussed for a while and finally decided that they had to get their hands on the rations. With food, they could think of a way to bring their clansmen over. They could then find a safe place to start a new life. Because of the rations, everyone was full of energy. Uncle Arhan led the scouts to scout twice and roughly guessed the route of the rations. Then, everyone gathered together to discuss the best place to ambush. On the day of the operation, Lu Heng and Qin Yining were left in the camp. Uncle Arjan and Harbala led more than 500 clansmen. Chagan Bala and the rest of the clansmen stayed behind to support at any time. The battle went on for an entire day. The next day, Uncle Arjan successfully escorted the provisions back. Because Qin Yining and Lu Heng's plan was flawless, only one person died and 3 clansmen were injured. Not only did they steal the provisions, but they also wiped out the escorting troops. This was already a rare miracle. Uncle Arjan had a new understanding of Qin Yining and Lu Heng's intelligence. His admiration and respect for them could not be any greater. For a time, all the clansmen knew that Qin Yining and Lu Heng were 2 extremely outstanding military strategists. Their strategies were unparalleled and their plans were flawless. As long as they listened to their plans, they would definitely be able to obtain victory at the lowest cost. After obtaining the provisions, Qin Yining and Lu Heng discussed the route. They did not stay in the same place for long. Instead, they rushed through the night to a valley that they had bypassed on their way here. Taking advantage of the heavy snow that would cover their tracks, they perfectly avoided the scouts that Sai Qin had arranged. At the same time, the news that the provisions had been intercepted quickly reached Sai Qin's ears. What? Completely wiped out? Ben Khan arranged for more than 100 elites. Each one of them could fight against 10 people. How could they be wiped out so easily? Who could have done it? The general's face was ashen. When Sai Qin roared, his face turned pale. He knelt down and saluted. "Please calm your anger, Your Highness. This subject is incompetent. Now that the roads have been blocked by the heavy snow, the situation outside is very bad. This subject does not know who did it. When this subject sent people to investigate, only the corpses of the warriors were left in the camp. The provisions, horses, and weapons had all disappeared without a trace." Disappeared without a trace. Sai Qin's voice was practically squeezed out from between his teeth. However, he pursed his lips and was still able to perfectly control his emotions and expression. He said neither too quickly nor too slowly, "Could it be that there really is an immortal who does not like our Tatan's strength and does not want us to avenge Nari Khan? Is that why such a farce has occurred?" No, Your Highness, please do not think that way. This subject is useless and has allowed the evil thief to take advantage of this loophole. How could there be an immortal who does not protect us? That's right, Your Highness. Now that the provisions have been lost, there must be traces. This subject will immediately order people to closely investigate. We will definitely find the whereabouts of the provisions. We must not let our provisions disappear into thin air. Sai Qin nodded and said, "If that's the case, then Ben Khan is relieved." Ben Khan also believes that we are a country under the protection of the gods. He also believes that no one would use witchcraft to quietly take away the provisions. When the ministers came out of the palace, they were blown by the cold wind. Only then did they realize that their backs were soaked in cold sweat. When the wind blew past, their bodies were cold. Yutjin Khan was truly a mighty Khan. He did not need to get angry. With just a few words, he was even more frightening than a Nari Khan when he was angry. Yutjin Khan clearly did not fly into a violent rage just now, but they were already trembling from the depths of their souls. This was the true majesty of an emperor. Percent Pang Xiao also received a letter from a pigeon. The Tatan provisions had been intercepted and disappeared without a trace. Now that Sai Qin's people were investigating the whereabouts of the provisions, the date of the war might be delayed. Pang Xiao's heart trembled as soon as he saw it. Although there was no evidence, and he did not see it with his own eyes, Pang Xiao was still certain that the matter of the provisions had something to do with Qin Yining. Sai Qin was very good at conducting himself. After ascending to the throne, not only did he treat the ministers well, he also exempted the common people from paying taxes. He also improved the lives of many slaves. Now, all of the Taitan people revered Yutjin Khan as a benevolent ruler. The unity of the Taitan had reached an unprecedented level in the past 50 years. Taitan wanted to avenge Anari Khan and wanted to start a war. He believed that no one would think of robbing the provisions. He also believed that Sai Qin would arrange for elites to transport the provisions. Ordinary bandits would not be able to steal the provisions. Therefore, Pang Xiao concluded that the matter of the provisions must have been premeditated by someone. And Qin Yining had the most motive to do so. This was because doing so could relieve the pressure on Daju, which was equivalent to relieving the pressure on him. Pang Xiao never doubted Qin Yining's intelligence and ability. Knowing that she was still alive had made him happy for several days. Now that she still had the energy to do such a big thing, Pang Xiao was pleasantly surprised. Pang Xiao quietly went to Qin Huayuan. When Qin Huayuan heard the news, he could not help but laugh. This girl, I thought that she had to suffer a lot outside. Who knew that she would have the ability to rob other people's provisions? At least now I don't have to worry about her not being able to eat her fill outside. Pang Xiao also laughed, but after laughing, he was a little worried. What if I guessed wrong and Sister Yi didn't do it? She might still starve. Taitan is colder than Beijing. Sister Yi was born in the south. I'm afraid that she won't be able to adapt. When Qin Huayuan heard this, he could not help but chuckle at Pang Xiao's worry about personal gains and losses. Don't worry, I can confirm that it was indeed Sister Yi who did it. Today, I received news from the Cao family from the Taitan border. Although the matter of Sister Yi and Lu Heng killing Nari Khan cannot be confirmed, they have already left Dadu with the Taitan Minuo tribe. They are now being pursued by Sai Qin. Minuo tribe. It used to be one of the most powerful Taitan tribes. However, it is said that they were severely persecuted by Nari Khan. There are not many young adults left in the tribe. Yes, it's this tribe. Every regime is not an iron bucket. It is not without loopholes. Now that Yutjin Khan is trying to curry favor with the Taitan people, he is using the bad things that she did when she was a Nari Khan to set off his current benevolence. When Pang Xiao heard this, he fell silent. Sai Qin's methods were extremely frightening. From the day that Sai Qin approached Anari, he had been scheming. Even when he helped Anari seize power, he had already paved the way for himself in the future. Such sinister and meticulous thoughts made one tremble in fear. Pang Xiao could not help but think of himself. The person sleeping next to him was also very smart and a person of unparalleled wisdom. However, she would not harm him, only help him. Even when she was in danger, she did not forget to lead people to steal Sai Qin's provisions to reduce the pressure on him. Not to mention the help she had given him in the disaster area. Pang Xiao felt as if his body and mind were soaked in honey. However, the more it was like this, the more the bone-piercing longing for her invaded his blood. If possible, Pang Xiao wished that Qin Yining could stay by his side safely. Even if she could not help him, it did not matter as long as she could accompany him safely. Sai Qin is so cunning. Sister Yi's situation in Taitan is very dangerous now. Pang Xiao frowned worriedly. If possible, I would have gone to Taitan myself and brought her back. Qin Huayuan patted Pang Xiao's shoulder comfortingly. Don't be too anxious. Things have not reached that stage yet. Sister Yi is with the Minuo tribe now. Although we don't know the details, one thing is for sure. Sister Yi is safe for the time being. Right now, our relationship with the Tartars is tense. If you act rashly, it won't be a joke if you are accused of treason. Don't forget that your life and death doesn't only represent you. Pang Xiao smiled bitterly and helplessly. It was because he knew that he had responsibilities that he could not shirk, that he could only helplessly wait here for news. Otherwise, he would have rushed to Taitan long ago. While the father-in-law and son-in-law were worried about Qin Yining hugged Cao Yuqing happily. Chapter 5:15. Cao Yuqing hugged Qin Yining, patted her thin back, and said, "I'm fine. Aunt Cao is very capable. How could anything happen to her? But you've lost so much weight. You must have suffered a lot, right?" Qin Yining almost burst into tears on the spot after hearing his sincere concern and a warm hug that wasn't very generous. She sniffed and said after a long time, "I'm fine. Although there were dangers along the way, I survived them in the end. Now that everything is in the past, don't you see that I'm fine? It's just that after we were taken away, I was worried that you would be buried underground. Is everyone okay?" At this time, the last thing Qin Yining wanted to hear was that someone had met with an accident that day. Qin Yining thought of those lively faces. Those people were still so young. If they lost their lives protecting her in the end, Qin Yining would probably feel guilty for the rest of her life. Cao Yuqing patted her shoulder and comforted her, "Don't let your imagination run wild. This time, God is on our side. Our people are all fine." Wang Yi brought people to the scene and dug up the entire cave to rescue everyone. Jing Zhe and the others ran out in advance, but their injuries were more serious. I asked them to rest well and they should have recovered by now. Bing Tang and Ji Yun were rescued by Wang Yi at that time, so you don't have to worry. That's good. Qin Yining let out a long sigh and said, "If something really happened to everyone because of me, then I would really have to bear the guilt for the rest of my life." Seeing that Qin Yining was silent and didn't ask anything else, Cao Yuqing took the initiative to say, "I used to think that Wang Yi liked your appearance, but a friend in need is a friend indeed. Now I understand Wang Yi's true feelings for you. Do you know? At that time, in order to stay behind to look for you, Wang Yi resisted more than 30 imperial edicts. Despite your Majesty's edict urging him to return to the capital, he stayed behind and almost turned the entire old capital and Yangxian upside down. After confirming that he couldn't find your corpse, Wang Yi reluctantly felt relieved and brought his men back to the capital." Qin Yining felt both sweet and sour at the same time. When she thought of Pang Xiao, she almost burst into tears again. "Is he all right now? Your Majesty didn't vent her anger on him, did she? And my father and mother?" Cao Yuqing patted her shoulder comfortingly and said, "Don't worry, everyone is fine. Wang Yi is someone with real talent. Your Majesty still needs him, so why would you touch him now? You, on the other hand, are missing. He's so skinny that it's like a layer of skin has been peeled off. You don't have to worry about your father. Although he is worried about you, he is a person full of wisdom. He knows what to do at the right time. He has the ability to protect himself." Qin Yining laughed heartily when she heard this, but more tears were squeezed out by her smile. She used her sleeve to wipe away her tears and said, "I know. As long as the family is fine, everything will be easy to handle." Cao Yuqing said, "That day, I saw you being taken away, but I couldn't do anything. During this period of time, I have been looking for your whereabouts. I sneaked into the Taitan capital, but I didn't see you. Later, I heard that a Nari Khan was assassinated. Not long after, I saw Yujin Khan's declaration of war. Only then did I know that you killed a Nari Khan. I contacted your father and he asked me to find you and bring you a message." "What message?" Qin Yining looked at Cao Yuqing attentively. Cao Yuqing looked around and saw that by the bonfire not far away, everyone was pricking up their ears to listen to the conversation. She couldn't help but look at Qin Yining questioningly. Qin Yining smiled knowingly and said, "It's fine. During this period of time, I have relied on everyone's care and protection. They are all trustworthy brothers." Uncle Arjan translated Qin Yining's words to Chagan Bala and the others. The people of the Minuo tribe all smiled kindly. Some of the young men and middle-aged men even looked at Cao Yuqing and Qin Yining with shyness and avoidance. They had never seen such beautiful women before, let alone two of them at the same time. When Cao Yuqing saw Qin Yining's reaction, she knew what was going on. She said in a low voice, "Your father means that you shouldn't go back to Daeju for now. It's safer outside because Yujin Khan wants to start a war. You know the situation in Daeju. Your Majesty doesn't want to go to war. He is looking for the simplest way to calm Yujin Khan's anger. Therefore, if you go back, You will definitely be treated as the murderer and handed over to Yujin Khan. Wouldn't that be like sending a lamb to the tiger's den? Therefore, your father means that you should stay outside for a while and wait until you see the situation in the country. Qin Yining couldn't help but be stunned when she heard this. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. It wasn't easy for her to see her family, but she couldn't return to the country because of such a reason. It would be a lie to say that she wasn't disappointed. However, Qin Yining also knew the severity of the situation. Now that she knew that Pang Xiao and her parents were all fine, she didn't have to worry about her family anymore. After all, it was a good thing. I know, Qin Yining said with a smile, I'm also fine here. Aunt Cao, please tell my father about my situation. Cao Yuqing nodded with a smile, then smiled kindly at Lu Heng and the others and saluted, thank you for taking care of my sister Yi during this period of time. If there is a chance in the future, I will definitely repay you. The others didn't understand Cao Yuqing's words, but Lu Heng and Uncle Ahan understood. When Lu Heng heard Qin Yining call Cao Yuqing aunt, he thought that she was her elder. He got up and politely returned the salute, you don't have to be so polite. We are all friends who have gone through thick and thin together, we don't care about these things. He had originally wanted to call Cao Yuqing aunt like Qin Yining, but Cao Yuqing was too young and beautiful. Time seemed to favor her and didn't leave any traces on her charming face. Lu Heng looked at her and felt that Cao Yuqing was younger than him. He guessed that this person was either younger than him but older than him, or she was Qin Huiyuan's concubine, so he didn't dare to address her carelessly. Uncle Ahan's face was as red as a piece of cloth. Qin Yining was beautiful, but in Uncle Ahan's eyes, she was a beautiful little girl who could be his daughter. Cao Yuqing's beauty was different. She was mature and charming, full of charm. Even though she was young, it was hard for people's hearts not to be moved. He frantically waved his hands and said in bad Daeju language, you don't have to be so polite, you don't have to be so polite. Wang Fei is our tribe leader and helped us get revenge. We should all support her and protect her. Seeing this, Cao Yuqing understood. She smiled and said softly, I still have to thank everyone. Saying this, she bowed again. In this world, beautiful people always received preferential treatment. Moreover, this beautiful person was so polite and gentle. She was also a relative of their tribe leader. This made the entire Minuo tribe accept Cao Yuqing very well. Both sides were polite. The other Minuo tribe members didn't understand what they were saying, but seeing everyone talking happily, they were also very happy. Qin Yining looked at Lu Heng and asked, Aunt Cao, do you know anything about the Lu family? When Lu Heng heard this, he was stunned. When he looked at Qin Yining again, his eyes were full of gentleness. Cao Yuqing keenly sensed Lu Heng's strange behavior. She understood and said calmly, I've been looking for you outside. I don't know much about the news in the capital, but the Lu family's matter is too big. I heard some news, but I'm not sure if it's true. When Lu Heng heard this, he said worriedly, is it because my grandfather fell ill and the position of the Lu family's leader was replaced? Cao Yuqing blinked in surprise. Seeing Cao Yuqing's expression, Lu Heng sighed and said, I guessed right. Cao Yuqing had a new understanding of Lu Heng's intelligence. She couldn't help but ask curiously, how did you guess? Lu Heng smiled bitterly and said, the Lu family's situation is like that. I already angered your majesty when I came out earlier. If there's an assassination attempt this time, the family will definitely push me out to take all the blame. I'm on the same side as my grandfather. In short, if something happens to me, the power in the family will definitely change.